The gun pressed against Arya's temple was cold, but her voice stayed steady. You think killing me breaks him? She met the kidnapper's eyes without flinching. You've already lost. Across the warehouse, Lucien Varick, the man who'd never surrendered to anyone, dropped his weapon and raised his hands. For her. The crime lord who'd built an empire on fear was offering himself as trade. But Arya knew something the enemy didn't. She hadn't survived this long by waiting to be saved. If you want to see how a waitress became the only person a kingpin would die for, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The mansion smelled like old money and fresh violence. Arya Vale had learned to recognize the scent during her first week working there. The way expensive cologne couldn't quite mask the metallic tang that clung to men who made their living with blood. She'd been serving breakfast in the East Wing for 3 months now, moving through Lucien Varick's world like a shadow, exactly as she intended. Invisible was safe. Invisible kept you breathing. She balanced the silver tray against her hip as she navigated the marble hallway, her footsteps silent on floors that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in shades of gold that felt like a lie. Beautiful things could be dangerous. She'd learned that lesson young, learned it with scars she kept hidden beneath long sleeves and careful smiles. The main dining room stretched before her, all dark wood and crystal chandeliers. Lucien sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. He was reading something on his tablet, his expression unreadable in that way powerful men perfected. The face that gave nothing away revealed no weakness. Arya had studied him carefully over the past 3 months, the way you'd study a dangerous animal whose territory you had to cross. Lucien Varick was in his late 30s, dark hair threaded with just enough silver to make him look distinguished rather than old. Sharp features, sharper eyes, the kind of handsome that made people underestimate how ruthless he could be. She'd watched him sign death warrants over morning coffee, watched him negotiate deals that would destroy families while butter melted on his toast. He did it all with the same calm efficiency, like violence was just another line item on his daily schedule. "Good morning, Mr. Varick." She set down the coffee service with practiced precision, her voice pitched to be pleasant but forgettable. He glanced up, nodded once. In 3 months, he'd probably spoken 20 words to her directly. She was staff. Furniture that occasionally moved? Perfect. The breakfast selection today includes just coffee. His attention had already returned to the tablet. I have a meeting in an hour. Of course, sir. She poured, her hands steady despite the tremor she felt deep in her chest. That tremor never fully left, that permanent echo of adrenaline from years of looking over her shoulder, waiting for the past to find her. But her hands stayed steady. She'd trained them to. The coffee was exactly how he liked it. Black, no sugar, hot enough to burn. She'd memorized everyone's preferences within her first week. Details mattered. Details kept you valuable enough to keep around, invisible enough to ignore. She was turning to leave when she caught movement through the window. The circular driveway curved in front of the mansion's main entrance, and Lucien's driver, Marcus, a bull of a man who'd never been anything but professional, was loading the car. Normal morning routine. Except, Arya's steps slowed. Marcus glanced toward the house, then back to the car. His hand moved to his jacket just for a second. The gesture was subtle, almost nothing. But Arya had spent years reading body language the way other people read books, learning to spot danger in the space between heartbeats. That wasn't a man checking his phone. That was a man checking his weapon. And the way he positioned himself by the rear passenger door, the angle of his body, the tension in his shoulders. Her pulse spiked. Every instinct she'd honed through survival screamed warning. She looked back at Lucien, still absorbed in whatever he was reading, completely unaware. In an hour, he'd walk out that door, slide into the back seat. Marcus would close the door behind him. Arya's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe she was seeing threats that weren't there, paranoia left over from a life spent running. Maybe Marcus was just tense about something else entirely. But maybe she was right, and if she was right and said nothing, Lucien Varick would be dead before lunch. The smart move was to stay quiet, keep her head down. She was a waitress, not a bodyguard. This wasn't her problem. Getting involved meant drawing attention, meant stepping out of the shadows that kept her safe. The smart move was to walk away. Arya had never been good at smart moves. She circled back to the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Mr. Varick." He didn't look up. "I said just coffee." "It's not about breakfast, sir." She kept her voice low, steady, even as every nerve ending screamed at her to run. "May I have a word? It's urgent." Something in her tone made him pause. He set down the tablet, those dark eyes finally focusing on her with full attention. It was like being caught in a spotlight, and she had to force herself not to flinch. "What is it?" She stepped closer, aware of how insane this was about to sound. "I think your driver is compromised." Silence stretched between them. His expression didn't change, but she felt the shift in the air, the way the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "Explain." One word, flat and dangerous. "The way he's positioning himself by the car, the way he keeps checking his jacket, the timing." She spoke quickly, quietly. "He's preparing for something. I've seen that pattern before. He's planning an ambush." "You've seen that pattern." Lucien's voice was soft, almost conversational, which somehow made it more menacing. "Tell me, Miss Vale, where exactly does a waitress learn to identify tactical positioning?" Her mouth went dry. This was it. The moment she'd pulled herself out of invisibility and into his direct line of sight. No going back now. "I pay attention," she said simply, "and I'm rarely wrong about these things." He studied her for a long moment, and Arya felt stripped bare under that gaze, like he was cataloging every lie she'd ever told, every secret she'd buried. Then he stood, moved to the window with predatory grace. She watched him observe Marcus, looking for what she'd seen. The seconds stretched. "Ivan," Lucian said, not raising his voice. A door opened immediately. Ivan Petrov, head of security, materialized like he'd been waiting just outside. Probably had been. "Sir?" "Have Marcus detained, quietly. Search him, search the car, and bring me his phone." Ivan's expression flickered, surprise, then grim understanding. "Right away." He disappeared. Lucienne remained at the window, watching. Arya stayed frozen by the table, unsure if she should leave, if she'd just signed her own death warrant along with Marcus's. "Come here." It wasn't a request. Arya crossed to the window, stood beside him, careful to maintain appropriate distance. Together they watched as Ivan and two other security personnel approached Marcus with casual efficiency. No drama, no confrontation, just professionals doing a job. Marcus saw them coming and ran. He made it maybe 10 feet before they took him down, fast and brutal. Even from here, Arya could see the panic on his face, the desperate struggle of a man who knew he'd been caught. "Well," Lucian said softly, "that's certainly suggestive." They brought Marcus inside through a side entrance, brought his phone too. Lucian scrolled through it in silence while Marcus knelt on the marble floor, held in place by Ivan's hand on his shoulder. The driver's face was sheet white, sweat beading on his forehead. "How much?" Lucian asked, still looking at the phone. How much did the Kozlov family pay you to put a bullet in my head?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. 50,000, Lucian read from the phone. "Interesting. I would have thought I was worth more." He pocketed the device, finally looking at the man who'd driven him for 2 years. "Take him to the basement. I'll deal with him later." "Please," Marcus started. "You can plead with whoever you pray to." Lucian's voice was ice. "I'm not interested in hearing it." They dragged Marcus away. His protest echoed through the hallway until a door slammed, cutting them off. The silence that followed felt heavy, dangerous. Lucian turned to face Arya fully for the first time. She met his gaze and refused to look away, even though every survival instinct told her to drop her eyes, to make herself small and unthreatening. "What's your name?" he asked. "Arya Vale, sir." "Your real name?" She hesitated. "That is my real name." "Interesting." He circled her slowly, like a shark assessing prey. Because Arya Vale didn't exist before 18 months ago. No employment history, no credit history, no digital footprint beyond a very clean, very recent identity. Her blood turned to ice. He'd checked on her. When? How long had he known? I run background checks on everyone who works in this house, he continued, answering her unspoken question. Yours was adequate, professional even, but not deep enough to hide from someone who knows what to look for. He stopped in front of her. You're running from something, or someone. It wasn't a question, so she didn't answer. I don't care, he said, which shocked her. Everyone who works for me is running from something. That's how I prefer it. People with nowhere else to go tend to be loyal. He tilted his head slightly. But now I'm curious. Where does someone learn to spot an assassination setup? Hard experience, Arya said quietly. Were you military? Intelligence? Neither. Then what? She looked him dead in the eye. I was someone who needed to learn fast or die young. Is there anything else, Mr. Varek? A smile ghosted across his face, there and gone. Yes, you're fired. Her stomach dropped. Sir, you're fired as a waitress, he clarified. As of now, you work directly for me. Personal security detail. I need people who see what others miss, and apparently you have that skill. He glanced at Ivan, who'd returned and was standing at attention. Get her set up. Weapons training, tactical briefing, everything. Hold on. Arya's mind was racing. This was the opposite of invisible. This was stepping directly into the spotlight, into danger. I didn't ask for this. No, you asked to save my life. Lucian's voice was sharp. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? You made yourself valuable, Miss Vale. Now you deal with the results. I'm a waitress, not a bodyguard. You were a waitress. Now you're something more useful. He turned away, dismissing her. Ivan will handle the details. Don't make me regret this. Arya stood frozen as Ivan gestured for her to follow. Her carefully constructed invisibility, the safe anonymity she'd built, all of it was crumbling. But what choice did she have? Say no to Lucian Varek? That wasn't how his world worked. She followed Ivan out, her mind spinning. Behind her, she heard Lucien make a phone call. Victor, we have a problem. Marcus was bought by the Kozlovs. Yes, I'm sure. No, it's handled. But we need to send a message. The voice faded as they moved deeper into the mansion, into parts of the house she'd never seen. Ivan led her down a staircase to a basement level that looked nothing like the luxury above. This was all concrete and steel, function over form. How long have you known about my background? She asked. Since day one. Ivan's expression was neutral. Boss knows everything about everyone in this house. You think you're the first person to show up with a fake identity? Then why hire me? Because you were good at being invisible, and we needed someone who could move through the house without drawing attention. Plus, your references checked out, or the people pretending to be your references did. Someone spent good money making you disappear. He glanced at her. Who are you running from? Does it matter? Depends. Are they going to show up here looking for you? No. She was certain of that much. They think I'm dead. Ivan nodded like this was perfectly normal conversation. Good. Keep it that way. He showed her to a room that was clearly for security personnel, sparse but functional, with a bed, desk, and weapons locker. Get settled. Training starts tomorrow at 6. You know how to shoot? Yes. Good. Makes my job easier. He turned to leave, then paused. You saved his life today, you know. The boss doesn't forget things like that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? In this world? Ivan smiled grimly. Both. 3 days later, Arya stood in Lucian's office while he explained exactly what her new job would entail. The office was on the 3rd floor, all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books that actually looked red. A wet bar in the corner, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses. The window behind his desk offered a view of the gardens, meticulously maintained, beautiful and controlled, like everything in Lucien's world. You won't carry a weapon initially, he was saying, seated behind his desk while she stood. Power dynamics, clear and deliberate. Your value is in observation, not firepower. I have plenty of people who can pull triggers. What I need is someone who can read a room, spot the danger before it happens. Like a human early warning system, Arya said. Exactly. He pulled up something on his computer, turned the screen toward her. This is Dmitry Kozlov. Recognize him. She studied the photo. A heavy-set man in his 50s, expensive suit, cruel eyes. Should I? He's the one who bought Marcus, head of the Kozlov family, one of my primary competitors for control of the port operations. Lucien's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing a business rival in legitimate trade rather than a crime syndicate. We've been circling each other for months. The attempt on my life means he's ready to escalate. So what are you going to do? Send a message. He closed the laptop. And you're going to help me deliver it. That night, Arya found herself in a Mercedes SUV, seated next to Lucien in the back, while Ivan drove and two other security personnel followed in a second vehicle. They were heading to the warehouse district, where the Kozlov family ran their operations out of a shipping container facility. This is insane, Arya said quietly. You're walking into enemy territory 3 days after they tried to kill you. Exactly. Lucien adjusted his cufflinks, calm as if they were heading to dinner. They'll expect me to hide, to fortify my position and wait. Going directly to them sends a message. I'm not afraid, and their attempt failed so spectacularly that I can afford to be bold. Or it gets you killed. That's why you're here. He looked at her. Tell me what you see. They'd been drilling her for 3 days, Ivan putting her through scenarios, testing her ability to read situations. She was getting better at articulating what her instincts told her, translating gut feelings into tactical assessments. As they approached the warehouse, she studied everything: the lighting, the number of visible guards, the positioning of vehicles, the sight lines. 2 guards at the main entrance, but they're too relaxed, she said. If they were expecting trouble, they'd be more alert. There's a vehicle parked at the west corner. Black sedan, engine probably running, given the exhaust. Exit strategy or quick response unit. Good. What else? The loading dock has better cover, but it's also more predictable. If they want to hit us, that's where they'd set up. The main entrance is exposed, but... She frowned. It's almost too exposed, like they want us to think it's a trap. Lucien smiled. You're learning. They pulled up to the main entrance. The guards tensed when they recognized the vehicle, hands moving to weapons but not drawing. Ivan got out first, then opened the door for Lucien. Arya followed, her heart hammering but her face calm. She'd learned years ago how to bury fear so deep it didn't show on the surface. The guards didn't stop them. One spoke rapidly into a radio, and 30 seconds later a man emerged from the warehouse, tall, thin, with the kind of sharp features that looked like they'd been carved from ice. Victor Kozlov, Lucien said pleasantly. Is your father available? Victor's expression was pure hatred. You have balls showing up here. I have proof your family tried to kill me. Thought we should discuss it face to face rather than starting a war that will cost us both. You think there won't be a war? Victor stepped closer. You think you can kill Marcus, and I haven't killed Marcus, Lucien interrupted. Yet, he's alive and he's talking, extensively, about who paid him, how much, what the plan was. He smiled, and it was terrifying in its pleasantness. He's giving me everything I need to burn your family's operations to the ground. Arya watched the exchange while simultaneously scanning their surroundings. More guards had appeared, maybe a dozen now, all armed. They were outnumbered, completely exposed. One wrong word and this turned into a bloodbath. But Lucien stood there like he owned the ground he was standing on, unafraid. You're lying, Victor said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Am I? How else would I know about the 50,000? About the plan to make it look like a carjacking gone wrong? Lucien pulled out his phone, showed Victor something. This is Marcus's phone, and these are his text messages with your payment coordinator. Timestamps, account numbers, everything. Victor's face went pale. Here's what's going to happen, Lucien continued. You're going to tell your father that his attempt failed and that I'm willing to forget it happened. In exchange, the Kozlov family stays out of the port operations. Completely. Forever. That's non-negotiable. The pleasant tone vanished, replaced with pure steel. Or I take these messages to every family in the city and show them how the Kozlovs operate, how they can't be trusted, how they target rivals through cowardice instead of honest conflict. He pocketed the phone. How long do you think your family survives when everyone knows you can't even kill one man properly? The silence stretched. Arya could feel the tension like electricity in the air. everyone waiting to see how this would break. Victor's hand moved toward his jacket. Don't. Arya spoke before she could think, her voice cutting through the moment. Everyone looked at her. Victor's hand froze. He's not going for a gun, she said, reading his body language, the angle of his reach. He's going for a phone. To call his father. Victor stared at her, then slowly, deliberately, pulled out a phone from his inside pocket. Not a weapon. Exactly as she'd said. Lucien didn't react, didn't even glance at her, but she felt his approval like warmth. Smart girl, Victor said, the words dripping with venom. He dialed, spoke rapidly in Russian. A pause. More Russian, his tone angry but submissive. Finally, he lowered the phone. My father wants to meet. Tomorrow. Neutral ground. Acceptable. Lucien turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Victor, tell him to bring a better offer than the one he gave Marcus. I'm worth at least 100,000. They were back in the vehicle before Arya allowed herself to breathe properly. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with her. You did well, Lucien said. I almost got us killed. No. You prevented a situation from escalating. There's a difference. He looked at her with something like respect. How did you know about the phone? The angle. If he was going for a weapon in a shoulder holster, his arm would move differently. Phone pocket is higher, different reach pattern. She was babbling now, nerves making her talk. Someone I knew used to carry both. I learned to tell the difference fast. Someone you knew, Lucien repeated. The person you're running from? She didn't answer. One day you'll tell me that story, he said. It wasn't a question or a threat, just a statement of fact. Maybe she would. Maybe in this world she was building around herself. Secrets were currency and truth was the price of trust. But not today. The meeting with Dmitry Kozlov happened in a restaurant that served as neutral ground, owned by the Italians, who stayed carefully out of Eastern European conflicts. Private room in the back, guards at the doors, weapons checked at the entrance. Arya sat behind Lucien, close enough to observe, but positioned as clearly subordinate. She was learning the dance of power in this world, how every position in a room meant something. Dmitry Kozlov was exactly what the photo suggested. Brutal and calculating, with eyes that had seen too much violence to be shocked by anything. He sat across from Lucien with two of his own people flanking him. You embarrassed my son, Dmitry said without preamble, his accent thick. Your son tried to play power games he wasn't ready for, Lucien replied smoothly. I simply reminded him of his place. By threatening war? By offering peace. There's a difference. Dmitry smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You want the ports. I want the ports. This was always going to end in blood. Perhaps. But whose blood, and how much? Lucien leaned back in his chair, relaxed. Your attempt failed, spectacularly. And now I have evidence of your involvement, evidence I can use to turn the other families against you. Is that really how you want to play this? You think the other families care about Marcus? I think they care about stability, about knowing the rules. Lucien's voice hardened. You broke the rules, Dmitry. You went after me personally instead of handling this through proper channels. That makes you unpredictable, and unpredictable men don't last long in our world. Arya watched Dmitry's face carefully. She was starting to understand the language of this world, the way power was negotiated through implied threats and carefully measured respect. Dmitry was calculating odds, running through scenarios. What do you want? He finally asked. The ports. Complete control. In exchange, I'll give you the eastern docks, the cargo operations, the warehouses. It's good money, stable, and it doesn't conflict with my interests. That's half what we make now. It's better than what you'll make dead or in prison, Lucien smiled. And it's a generous offer, considering you tried to kill me. Dmitry was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, a rough bark of sound. You're either very brave or very stupid coming here to dictate terms. I'm neither. I'm practical. Lucien met his gaze steadily. This ends one of two ways. We make a deal or we go to war. War is expensive, messy, draws attention we both don't want. A deal is clean, profitable, and lets us both sleep at night. And if I refuse? Then I'll destroy you piece by piece until there's nothing left of the Kozlov name but a cautionary tale. The words were delivered with such calm certainty that Arya felt a chill. This was Lucien Varick unmasked, not the polite businessman, not the cultured crime lord, but the ruthless operator who'd built an empire on calculated violence. Dmitri studied him for a long moment. "You've changed," he said finally. "Before, you would have just come after me. Now you talk. You negotiate." His eyes shifted to Arya. "Because of her. Because I'm getting smarter about how I use violence," Lucien corrected. "But yes, partly because of her. She reminds me that survival sometimes requires different strategies." Arya felt the weight of both men's attention. She kept her face neutral, gave nothing away. "You have a deal," Dmitri said abruptly. "The port's for the eastern docks. But the first time you interfere with my operations, you'll have cause for retaliation. I understand." Lucien stood, extended his hand. Dmitri shook it, the gesture sealing agreements that would reshape territory and power across the entire city. As they left the restaurant, Arya felt the enormity of what had just happened. Violence had been averted, deals made, power redistributed, all through words and carefully calculated pressure. "You're learning," Lucien said as they walked to the car. "Learning what?" "That violence is easy. It's the default option, the simple solution. Real power is knowing when not to use it." He glanced at her. "You saved my life, Arya, but you also gave me something more valuable. You reminded me that there are other ways to win." In the car ride back, she watched the city pass by outside the window, lights blurring together. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a waitress trying to stay invisible. Now she was sitting next to a crime lord who'd just reshaped the city's power structure, and somehow, impossibly, she was part of it. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "You said you have plenty of people who can pull triggers. Why promote me specifically?" Lucien was quiet for a moment. "Because everyone else in my world sees what they expect to see. They look at a situation and see the obvious threats, the clear dangers. You see the details everyone else misses, the subtle shifts in body language, the pattern that doesn't fit. That's rare. That's valuable. That's just survival instinct." "Exactly." He looked at her directly. "You've survived things that should have killed you. That means you see the world differently than people who've always felt safe. And in my world, that perspective is worth more than a dozen trained killers." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she stayed quiet. "I'm going to need you at the port negotiations next week," he continued. "Several families will be there, everyone positioning for advantage. I need you to watch, to tell me who's lying, who's planning something, who's about to break." "You're asking me to read minds." "I'm asking you to read people. It's what you do." And he was right. It was what she did. What she'd always done. The skill that had kept her alive when nothing else could. "What if I'm wrong?" she asked. "What if I misread someone and it causes problems?" "Then we deal with the consequences." He smiled slightly. "I'm not asking for perfection, Arya. I'm asking for honesty. Tell me what you see, and I'll decide how to act on it." It was, she realized, a kind of trust. Dangerous and complicated, but trust nonetheless. The next week, she stood in a converted warehouse while the heads of 6 different families negotiated territory. She watched them all, the careful lies, the hidden aggression, the alliances forming and breaking in real time. And she whispered observations to Lucien, quiet enough that only he could hear. "The Italian on the left, he's nervous about something, keeps glancing at his phone. The Russians are split. The older one wants the deal, but the younger one is already planning how to undermine it. The man in the blue suit? He's military trained. Look at how he positions himself, always covering exits, never sitting with his back exposed." Lucien listened to everything, used her observations to navigate the negotiations with surgical precision. By the end of the night, he'd secured the port contracts, made alliances with 2 families, and identified 3 potential threats before they could materialize. "You're good at this," Ivan said to her afterward, grudging respect in his voice. "I'm good at staying alive," she corrected. "This is just an extension of that." But it was more than that, and she knew it. She was becoming part of this world, building a place for herself in Lucien's empire. It terrified her. It also felt like this first time in years she'd been truly seen, truly valued for her actual skills rather than what she could pretend to be. Dangerous ground. She was walking dangerous ground. That night, alone in her new room, larger now, better appointed, Reflecting her rising status, she stared at herself in the mirror. The face looking back was the same one she'd seen for years, but something had changed. The permanent tension around her eyes had eased slightly. The constant fear had receded just a fraction. She was still running, still hiding, but for the first time she was running towards something instead of just away. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lucien. Breakfast tomorrow, 7 a.m., need to discuss the Calabrese situation. She typed back, I'll be there. Simple words. Professional distance. But underneath them, she felt the shift happening. The slow dissolution of the walls she'd built around herself. It should have scared her more than it did. 2 months in, and Arya had become indispensable. She attended every meeting, every negotiation, every high-stakes deal. She stood in the background and watched, always watching, reading the room the way other people read text. And afterward, she'd brief Lucien on everything she'd observed. Who was lying, who was nervous, who was planning betrayal. She was right more often than she was wrong. And when she was wrong, Lucien never blamed her. He'd simply adjust his strategy, factor in new information, move forward. You're too trusting, she told him one morning, after a meeting where she'd caught someone trying to plant listening devices. And you're too suspicious, he countered, but there was amusement in his voice. They were in his office, the morning sun painting everything gold. He was reviewing contracts while she sat across from him, drinking coffee and going through security reports Ivan had compiled. This had become their routine. Early mornings, working in comfortable silence, occasionally broken by conversation. It felt almost normal, like they were colleagues in a legitimate business rather than a crime lord and his newly promoted security consultant. The Calabrese family wants a meeting, Lucien said, not looking up from his papers, to discuss the shipping routes. It's a trap. Probably. He smiled slightly. Tell me why you think so. Because they're losing money to your port operations, and they're desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. She set down her coffee. They'll either try to negotiate from weakness and give away too much, or they'll try something violent to regain leverage. Either way, it's a bad meeting. And if I refuse? They interpret it as fear, which makes them bolder, also bad. So what do you recommend? She thought about it, turning the problem over in her mind. Meet them. But not on their terms. Choose the location, control the environment, bring overwhelming security. Make it clear that you're willing to talk but not willing to be threatened. Lucien set down his pen, looked at her with those dark, assessing eyes. You're thinking like a strategist now. I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want to get shot. It's the same thing in this world. He stood, moved to the window that overlooked the gardens. You know what I appreciate most about you, Arya? My sparkling personality? He laughed, an actual laugh, rare and genuine. Your honesty. Everyone else tells me what they think I want to hear. You tell me what I need to know, even when it's uncomfortable. That's just called doing my job. No, that's called being trustworthy. He turned to face her. Do you know how rare that is in my world? She didn't answer, wasn't sure how to. The conversation had shifted into territory she wasn't prepared for. Something more personal than their usual professional dynamic. I'm going to the Calabrese meeting, he said, shifting back to business. And you're coming with me. I want your eyes on this. When? Tonight, 9 p.m., the Venetian Club. She nodded, already running through scenarios in her mind. The Venetian was neutral ground, well lit, lots of witnesses. Good for preventing violence, but also good for public humiliation if things went wrong. Be ready for anything, Lucien added, as if she was ever ready for anything else. That evening, she dressed in dark colors, professional but functional. Nothing that would restrict movement if things went sideways. She'd learned to think about clothing tactically now, everything chosen for utility over fashion. The Venetian Club was exactly as fancy as its name suggested. All marble and gold, crystal chandeliers, wealthy people pretending not to notice the criminal element that occasionally used it for meetings. The manager showed them to a private room in the back, where the Calabrese family was already waiting. Giovanni Calabrese was older than she'd expected, maybe 70, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades in a hard business. He sat flanked by 2 younger men, his sons, she guessed from the resemblance. Lucien. Giovanni's voice was gravelly, worn. Thank you for coming. Of course. Lucian took the offered seat across from him, and Arya positioned herself behind and to the left, her usual spot. You wanted to discuss shipping routes. I want to discuss how you're destroying my family's livelihood. Direct. Arya appreciated that. No pretense, no games, just the truth laid out flat. Your family's livelihood was built on monopoly, Lucian replied calmly. I simply introduce competition. That's business. That's warfare. Giovanni leaned forward. You're strangling us. The port fees you're charging are unsustainable. We're losing money on every shipment. Then adjust your business model. Or we could adjust yours. One of the sons spoke up, his voice hard with barely controlled anger. Arya felt the shift immediately, the temperature change, the way hands moved slightly closer to weapons. The son was young, maybe 30, and he had that dangerous combination of pride and stupidity that got people killed. Marco, Giovanni said, a warning. What? We're just supposed to accept this? Let him destroy everything we built? Marco's eyes were fixed on Lucian with pure hatred. He needs to learn respect. I respect strength, Lucian said evenly. Show me strength, and I'll respect it. How's this for strength? Marco's hand moved toward his jacket, and Arya moved faster. She was out of her chair and between them before conscious thought caught up with instinct, one hand raised in a stopping gesture, the other reaching for the weapon she now carried at her hip. Don't, she said, her voice sharp and clear. The entire room froze. Marco stared at her, surprised to find a woman he'd barely noticed, suddenly blocking his path. I think you're about to make a mistake that gets everyone in this room killed, Arya interrupted, her heart hammering but her voice steady. There are 20 armed men outside that door who will come in if they hear a gunshot. Your father knows this. Your brother knows this. She met his eyes. Do you know this? The silence stretched. She could feel Lucian behind her, could sense Yvonne and the other security detail tensing, ready to act. She's right, Giovanni said quietly. Marco, sit down. But sit. Down. Marco sat, but his eyes burned with humiliation and rage. Arya slowly moved back to her position, her hand still near her weapon, adrenaline making everything sharp and clear. My apologies, Giovanni said to Lucian. My son is passionate. Your son is reckless, Lucian corrected, but I appreciate passion. It shows investment. He leaned back in his chair, completely composed, as if he hadn't just been seconds away from violence. Here's what I'm willing to offer. Reduced port fees for your cargo operations. 20% reduction for the first year, 15% after that. In exchange, you cease all attempts to undermine my operations. That's not enough. It's generous considering the alternative is watching your business collapse entirely. Lucien's voice hardened. I'm offering you survival, Giovanni. I suggest you take it. The old man studied him for a long moment. Arya could see the calculations happening, the weighing of pride against practicality. 30% reduction, Giovanni countered. First 2 years? 25%, 18 months, final offer. Another pause. Then Giovanni extended his hand. We have a deal. They shook, and just like that, another conflict was resolved through negotiation instead of bloodshed. In the car afterward, Lucian turned to her. That was brave. Also incredibly stupid. You're welcome, she said dryly. I'm serious. You put yourself between me and a potential threat. That's not your job. I thought my job was keeping you alive. Your job is observation, not martyrdom. But there was something in his voice, concern maybe, or something close to it. Don't do that again. No promises. He looked at her for a long moment, and she felt that shift again, that dangerous blurring of professional lines. They'd been working together for 2 months now, spending hours together every day. She knew how he took his coffee, what news stories would make him angry, the subtle tells that indicated his mood. And he knew things about her too, even though she'd been careful with personal information. He knew she had nightmares sometimes, had walked past her room late one night and heard her wake with a gasp. He knew she preferred tea to coffee after dinner. He knew she read voraciously, burning through books like fuel. They were becoming not friends exactly. Something more complicated than that. Something dangerous. The Calabrese son. Marco, she said, deliberately breaking the moment. He's going to be a problem. I know. Lucien looked out the window at the passing city. Men like him don't forgive humiliation. He'll wait, plan, and then try something stupid. Should we? We watch, we prepare. And when he makes his move, we respond decisively. He glanced at her. You're thinking ahead now. Good. 3 days later, her instincts proved correct. Marco Calabrese tried to sabotage one of Lucien's shipments, a clumsy attempt that was caught immediately by port security. The cargo was protected, but Marco's involvement was clear. What do you want to do? Ivan asked Lucien as they reviewed the security footage. Lucien looked at Arya. What do you think? She was getting used to him asking her opinion on matters of strategy, but it still felt surreal. Giovanni made a deal in good faith. His son acted independently. If you punish the father for the son's actions, you break the deal and restart the conflict. And if I let Marco walk away? He'll try again, escalate, eventually force you to respond with violence anyway. So what's the solution? She thought about it. Punish Marco, but do it in a way that doesn't violate the deal with Giovanni. Make it clear that the son's actions aren't the father's fault, but that consequences still apply. Lucien smiled. Ivan, arrange a meeting with Giovanni. Private, just the two of us. The meeting happened that evening. Arya wasn't present, but Lucien told her about it afterward. I showed Giovanni the footage, he said, told him his son had violated our agreement, but that I was willing to be reasonable. How reasonable? Marco is banned from all port operations, permanently. If Giovanni can't control his son, then his son loses access to the family business entirely. Lucien poured himself a drink from the wet bar in his office. Giovanni agreed, said it was fair, even thanked me for handling it this way, instead of other methods. And Marco? Furious from what I understand, but contained, for now. Arya accepted the glass of wine he offered her, another new element in their evening routine. He's going to hate you forever. People have hated me for less. He raised his glass slightly, to not dying today. She clinked her glass against his. To not dying. They drank, and she felt the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. This life she was building, this place she was carving out, it was real now, undeniable. She'd stepped fully out of invisibility and into the heart of Lucien's empire. And despite everything, despite the danger and the violence and the constant threat, she'd never felt more alive. You're smiling, Lucien observed. Am I? You are. It's unusual. You normally look like you're calculating escape routes. I am calculating escape routes. I just happen to be smiling while I do it. He laughed, and the sound was becoming familiar, less rare. She was learning to read his moods, to understand the man behind the crime lord facade, which was dangerous, because understanding led to caring, and caring led to weakness, and weakness in this world got you killed. But she couldn't seem to stop herself. Tell me something true, Lucien said suddenly, settling into the chair across from her. Not about work, not about strategy, something real. Like what? Like who you were before you became Arya Vale. She tensed immediately. I'm not asking for details. I'm not asking for the full story. His voice was gentle, almost careful. I'm just asking for something true. One thing. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing risks, then quietly, I had a sister. Had? She died 5 years ago. The words came out flat, emotionless, but underneath them was an ocean of grief she'd never fully processed. She's the reason I learned to see danger coming. I didn't see it for her, and she paid the price. Lucien was quiet, just listening. Everything I am now, the paranoia, the constant vigilance, the need to read every situation, it all comes from failing to protect her. Arya stared at her wine glass. So when I saw Marcus preparing that ambush, I didn't even think. I just reacted. Because I can't fail to see danger again. I can't. You didn't fail her, Lucien said quietly. You don't know that. I know that you're here, surviving. That takes more strength than most people have. He leaned forward slightly. Thank you for telling me. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable despite the heavy conversation. Outside, the city sprawled in all directions, millions of lives being lived in ignorance of the power games and violent negotiations happening in rooms like this. I'm trusting you, Lucian said eventually. More than I've trusted anyone in years. You understand that? I do. And I'm asking you to trust me, to believe that I'll keep you safe, that I won't let your past catch up to you here. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you care? I'm just an employee, just someone who happened to save your life. You're more than that. He met her eyes, and there was something raw in his expression, something vulnerable. You see me, Arya. Not the reputation, not the power. You see the person underneath, the decisions, and the cost. No one else does that. The moment stretched between them, charged with something she didn't want to name. This is dangerous, she whispered. Everything in my world is dangerous. I mean this. Us. Whatever this is becoming. I know. He stood, moved to the window. But I'm tired of living in a world where everyone either fears me or wants to use me. You do neither. I'm scared of you sometimes. Good. You should be. I'm a dangerous man. He turned back to face her. But you're dangerous, too, in your own way. That's why this works. She stood as well, knowing she should leave, should retreat to safety before this conversation went any further. But she couldn't seem to move. Lucienne, you don't have to say anything. Just think about it. His voice was soft. Think about the possibility that maybe, in this impossible world, there's room for something real. She did leave then, retreating to her room with her heart hammering and her mind spinning. Something real. In a world built on lies and violence and carefully maintained facades, the idea seemed absurd. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't deny the truth. She was already falling. Had been falling since that first morning when she'd whispered a warning and stepped out of invisibility. The only question now was whether she'd survived the landing, or if surviving even mattered anymore. The first time Lucian kissed her, it wasn't romantic. They were in a warehouse on the south side, meeting with suppliers who'd been skimming profits for months. The negotiation had gone badly, voices raised, threats made, the kind of posturing that usually preceded violence. Arya had been watching the supplier's enforcer, a thick-necked man with dead eyes, and she'd seen the shift in his stance, the way his hand drifted toward his weapon. She'd stepped closer to Lucian, whispered a warning. He'd nodded slightly, then done something completely unexpected. He'd pulled her close and kissed her, hard and sudden, like they were lovers who couldn't keep their hands off each other. The supplier had laughed, the tension breaking. "Get a room, Varric." "Apologies." Lucian had pulled back, his hand still on her waist. "You understand how it is." The meeting had ended without bloodshed. They'd gotten what they came for. In the car afterward, Arya had stared straight ahead, her heart still racing. What was that? A distraction. They were going to make a move. I needed to change the dynamic, make them see us as people instead of threats. He'd glanced at her. "I apologize if I crossed a line." "You did." "I know." A pause. But it worked. She couldn't argue with that. And she couldn't pretend her pulse had jumped purely from adrenaline. That had been 3 weeks ago. They hadn't spoken about it since. Now she stood in Lucian's office at midnight, reviewing security footage of a new threat. The Petrov family. Moving in from the east, testing boundaries. They'd been at it for hours, her eyes burning from screen fatigue, coffee, long since gone cold. "There, Suck." She pointed at a frame. "That's the third time this week someone's photographed the warehouse district. They're doing reconnaissance." Lucienne leaned closer to look. Close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that she'd come to associate with safety, which was absurd considering who he was. "You're right, Ivan. Increase patrols in that sector." Ivan, who'd been half asleep in the corner, straightened. "On it." He left, leaving them alone. The silence felt heavy with everything they weren't saying. "You should get some sleep," Lucian said, not looking at her. "It's late." "So should you." "I don't sleep much anymore." He rubbed his eyes, a rare show of fatigue. "Every time I close my eyes, I see all the ways things could go wrong. That's called paranoia. That's called experience." He smiled slightly. "You're the one who taught me to see threats everywhere." "I taught you to be careful. There's a difference." "Is there?" He turned to face her fully. "Because lately I can't tell anymore. Can't tell where careful ends and paranoid begins. Can't tell where professional ends and personal begins." There it was, the conversation they'd been avoiding for weeks, laid out between them like a live grenade. Lucienne, I think about you. The words were quiet but deliberate. More than I should, more than is smart or safe or appropriate. He took a step closer. And I think you think about me too. She should deny it, should laugh it off, retreat behind professional boundaries, remind him of all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she said, yes. One word, an admission that changed everything. We can't, she added, but it sounded weak even to her own ears. Why not? Because you're my boss. Because this world is dangerous enough without adding complications. Because I'm still running from things I haven't told you about. Because you're scared. Yes. The honesty felt like stripping off armor. Terrified. Of me? Of this. Of what it means, what it could cost. She wrapped her arms around herself. Everyone I've ever cared about has gotten hurt. My sister died because I wasn't careful enough, wasn't smart enough to see the danger coming. That wasn't your fault. How would you know? The words came out sharp, defensive. You don't know what happened. You don't know what I did, what I failed to do. Then tell me. He closed the distance between them, his voice gentle. Tell me the whole story. Let me decide for myself. She'd never told anyone, had carried the weight of it alone for 5 years, the guilt and grief locked away behind walls she'd built to survive. But standing here, in this room, with this man who somehow made her feel seen and safe, despite being neither, the walls started to crack. Her name was Sophie. The words came slowly, painfully. She was 2 years younger than me, beautiful, brilliant, everything good in the world. Arya's throat tightened. And she fell in love with the wrong man. Lucian waited, didn't push, just listened. His name was Marcus Reeves, charming, successful, perfect on paper. But he was controlling, possessive, started isolating her from friends, from family. I saw the signs, but I didn't, her voice broke. I didn't push hard enough, didn't insist she leave. I thought she'd figure it out on her own. What happened? He killed her. The words were flat, drained of emotion because that was the only way to say them. Made it look like an accident, a fall down the stairs, in their apartment. The police believed him. Everyone believed him. He was that good at lying. But you didn't believe him. I knew. I'd seen the bruises she tried to hide, heard the fear in her voice when she made excuses for him. I knew, and I did nothing, and she died because I was too weak, too afraid to act. Arya felt tears burning, but refused to let them fall. So I learned to see danger, to trust my instincts, to never ignore warning signs again. And I made sure Marcus Reeves paid for what he did. Lucien's expression shifted. What did you do? I gathered evidence. Everything he'd hidden, everything the police missed. It took me 8 months, but I built a case that was airtight. She met his eyes. Then I delivered it to his enemies. People he'd cheated in business deals, rivals who wanted him gone. I made sure they knew exactly what kind of man he was, exactly how vulnerable he was. They killed him. They made it look like suicide, poetic justice, they called it. Her voice was bitter. But his family had connections, had resources. They started asking questions, started looking for whoever had given up the information. So I ran, built a new identity, buried the old one, and kept moving until I ended up here. Here. In my house, serving me breakfast. Lucien absorbed this. That's why you noticed Marcus the driver, why you understood the pattern. I'd seen it before. Different context, same basic setup. She laughed without humor. Ironic, isn't it? I saved you using skills I learned from failing to save her. You didn't fail her, Arya. I watched her die. You were in an impossible situation with an abuser who knew how to manipulate systems designed to protect people. His voice was firm. And then you made sure he faced consequences. That takes courage. It takes rage. Sometimes they're the same thing. He reached out, gently tilted her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. You're not responsible for her death. He is. Only him. The tears came then, hot and unexpected, years of grief finally breaking through. Lucien pulled her close, and she let herself collapse against him, let herself be held for the first time since Sophie died. They stood like that for a long time, her crying into his shirt while he just held her, steady and warm and solid. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I never do that." "Maybe you should more often." He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Carrying everything alone isn't strength, it's just exhausting." She laughed, a watery sound. "Is that your philosophy? The crime lord who cares about emotional wellness?" "Even crime lords have feelings." But he smiled. "Shocking, I know." The moment hung between them, charged and delicate. His hand was still on her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. She could see the question in his eyes, the same one that had been building between them for weeks. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Most of my best decisions are terrible ideas." "I'm serious, Lucien. This world you live in, it doesn't allow for what? Connection? Trust? Love?" He said the last word carefully, testing its weight. "Maybe not, but I'm tired of living in a world of nothing but strategy and violence. Tired of being alone even when I'm surrounded by people. I can't promise I won't leave. Can't promise my past won't catch up and destroy everything. And I can't promise you'll be safe with me. Can't promise this life won't break you eventually." His voice was raw, honest. "But I can promise that while we're together, I'll fight for you, protect you, see you." "See me," she repeated. "Not use me, not control me. Never. You're not a possession, Arya. You're—" He paused, searching for words. "You're the first real thing in my life in longer than I can remember." She kissed him. Decision made, walls breached, consequences be damned. She kissed him, and he kissed back. And it felt like falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, she was breathing hard, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "Your room or mine?" she asked. "Whichever has the better security." But he was smiling, real and unguarded in a way she'd never seen. They went to his room, the master suite with reinforced doors and panic buttons hidden in the walls. Because even in moments of intimacy, their world demanded precautions. Afterward, lying in his bed with moonlight painting silver across the sheets, she traced the scars on his chest. He had a collection of them, a roadmap of violence survived. "This one?" She touched a long mark along his ribs. "Knife fight 8 years ago. Dispute over territory." "This one?" A puckered circle on his shoulder. "Gunshot 10 years ago. Attempted assassination by a rival who thought I was moving in on his operation." "You have a lot of people trying to kill you." "Occupational hazard." He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "What about you? Any scars?" She hesitated, then showed him her left forearm, a thin white line from wrist to elbow. "Marcus Reeves. I tried to confront him after Sophie died. He put me through a glass door." Lucien's expression darkened. "Good thing he's already dead, saves me the trouble." "You can't protect me from the past." "No, but I can make damn sure it doesn't define your future." He pulled her closer. "We're both broken, Arya. Both carrying damage that never quite heals. Maybe that's why this works. We understand each other's scars." She settled against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out how to navigate this. Together." His voice was quiet in the darkness. "No more hiding, no more pretending this isn't happening. We're partners in every sense." "Partners in crime," she said, trying for humor. "Partners in survival." He kissed the top of her head. "Which in this world amounts to the same thing." She should have been scared, should have been thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, all the vulnerabilities they were creating. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Morning came too fast. She woke to find Lucien already up, dressed in another expensive suit, looking every inch the powerful crime lord. The vulnerability from last night was locked away behind his usual mask of control. "Meeting with the Russians at 10, he said, nodding his tie. "Then lunch with the city council members we have on payroll. You're coming to both." "Back to business. Always." But when he looked at her, his expression softened slightly. "This doesn't change what we are professionally. You're still my most valuable asset, and I'm still relying on your judgment." Romantic. "I'm being practical. In public, we maintain professional distance. No one can know about this. It would make you a target, make us both vulnerable. He sat on the edge of the bed. But in private, when it's just us, this is real. You understand? I understand. She did, even if it wasn't ideal. Secret relationship with my crime lord boss. What could possibly go wrong? He laughed. Everything, probably spectacularly. Then he sobered. But I'm willing to risk it if you are. I'm here, aren't I? The meeting with the Russians was tense. They wanted access to the port facilities for shipping operations that were clearly drug-related. Lucian was trying to keep his operation clean enough to avoid federal attention while dirty enough to maintain power. Arya watched from her usual position, reading the room. The lead negotiator, a man named Sergei, was professional, but his second, a younger man with nervous energy, kept glancing at the door like he was expecting backup. She leaned forward, whispered in Lucian's ear. The younger one is wired. Look at how he keeps adjusting his collar. Lucien nodded imperceptibly, then smiled at Sergei. Before we continue, I'm going to need everyone to submit to a quick security check. Standard protocol. Sergei's expression didn't change, but the younger man went pale. That's not necessary? Lucien's voice hardened. In my house, it's always necessary. You can submit to the check or you can leave. Your choice. The sweep revealed exactly what Arya had suspected, a wire transmitting everything to someone outside. Sergei looked genuinely shocked, which suggested he hadn't known his own man was compromised. Who are you working for? Lucien asked the younger man, his voice dangerously calm. I don't even hit him. Not hard, just enough to make a point. Answer the question. Federal task force, the man gasped. They approached me 3 months ago, said they'd clear my record if I cooperated. Sergei swore in Russian. You idiot! You've destroyed everything! Take him outside, Lucien said to Ivan. I'll deal with him later. He turned to Sergei. You didn't know? On my life, no. He was my nephew. I trusted him. Sergei looked genuinely devastated. What will you do? That depends. Do you still want to do business? After this? You should kill us both. Probably. Lucien leaned back in his chair. But I'm in a generous mood. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your organization and tell them this meeting never happened. The federal agent who sent your nephew gets nothing useful. And in exchange for my discretion, you're going to owe me a favor, a significant one. Sergei studied him. You're collecting debts. I'm building relationships. There's a difference. After they left, minus the nephew, who Ivan took to a secure location for further questioning, Arya found herself alone with Lucien in his office. Federal task force, she said. That's new. They've been sniffing around for months, only a matter of time before they tried to plant someone. He poured himself a drink. How did you spot the wire? The way he kept adjusting his collar. It's a tell. People wearing wires unconsciously check them, make sure they're positioned correctly. You see it in nervous sources, undercover cops, anyone who's not used to being wired up. You're observant. You're alive because I'm observant. He smiled. True. Come here. She crossed to him, and he pulled her close, kissed her properly for the first time since the previous night. It still felt surreal, this intimacy with a man who ordered violence as casually as ordering dinner. I have a question, she said when they broke apart. The nephew, what's going to happen to him? Ivan will question him, find out exactly what he told the feds, what they know. Lucien's voice was matter of fact. Then we'll decide based on how much damage he's done. Decide whether to kill him. Yes. And if I asked you not to? He looked at her carefully. Why would you? Because he's a kid who made a stupid choice. Because killing him brings more federal heat. Because... She hesitated. Because I'm asking. If I let him live, it shows weakness. If you let him live strategically, it shows control. Shows you're strong enough to be merciful when it serves your interests. She held his gaze. And it means more to Sergei than you can imagine. You'll own him completely. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. You're thinking like me now, calculating angles, weighing consequences. Is that a bad thing? No, it's brilliant. He kissed her forehead. All right. The nephew lives. We'll use him to feed false information to the feds, muddy their investigation. Happy? Yes. She knew she shouldn't feel good about manipulating a federal investigation, but she couldn't bring herself to care. The nephew would live, Sergei would be grateful, and Lucien's operation would be protected. Win-win-win in this twisted world. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. By day, they were all business. Meetings, negotiations, constant threat assessment. Arya became his shadow, always watching, always whispering observations that helped him navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries. By night, they were something else entirely. Partners in a different sense, learning each other's bodies the way they'd learned each other's minds. Felt dangerous and right in equal measure. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Lucian said one night, both of them sprawled across his bed in comfortable exhaustion. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said. "Before everything fell apart, I was studying education. Wanted to work with kids, help them learn." "That's—" He trailed off. "Ironic, given what I do now?" "I was going to say sweet, but also, yes, ironic." He traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "What stopped you?" "Sophie died. Everything else stopped mattering after that. Just survival, just revenge, just running." She turned to face him. "Your turn. Something you've never told anyone." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I never wanted this life. My father built this empire, groomed me to take over, but I wanted to be an architect. Design buildings, create things instead of destroying them." "So why didn't you?" "Because he died when I was 22, and suddenly I had a choice, watch everything collapse or step into his shoes. So I stepped." His voice was distant. "And I've been wearing shoes that don't quite fit ever since." She kissed him, slow and gentle. "We're quite a pair. The teacher and the architect playing crime lord and bodyguard." "Playing?" He smiled against her lips. "We're pretty damn good at it." They were. That was the terrifying part. They'd found their rhythm, complementing each other's strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. She saw the threats he missed, and he provided the power to neutralize them. Together, they were formidable. But formidable attracted attention. The Petrov family made their move on a Tuesday. Arya spotted the setup immediately. Too many vehicles in the warehouse district, too many unfamiliar faces. She grabbed her phone, called Lucien. "It's happening. They're hitting the warehouse." "How many?" "At least 20, maybe more. This isn't a probe, it's an assault." "Get out of there." "Not happening. I'm 3 blocks away, I can—" "Arya!" His voice was sharp with fear she'd never heard before. "Get out. That's an order." "Since when do I take orders?" She was already moving, heading toward the warehouse instead of away. "Even needs backup. I'm not leaving our people." She hung up before he could argue, switched her phone to silent, and kept moving. This was stupid, reckless, exactly the kind of thing that got people killed. But Ivan was in that warehouse with 6 other security personnel, outnumbered and outgunned. The gunfire started before she reached the building. She came in through a side entrance, weapon drawn, adrenaline singing through her veins. The scene inside was chaos. Ivan and his team pinned down behind shipping containers while Petrov's people advanced. She took position in the rafters, started picking off targets. She wasn't a trained sniper, but she'd gotten good enough in the past months, and from this angle she had the advantage. 3 shots, 3 hits. Not fatal. She aimed for shoulders and legs, trying to disable rather than kill. It was enough to shift the momentum. Ivan's team rallied, pushed forward, and within minutes the Petrov assault was falling apart. Their people retreated, dragging wounded with them, leaving the warehouse floor stained with blood and spent brass. "You're insane," Ivan said when he found her in the rafters. "But thank you." "Don't mention it. Literally, Lucian can never know I was here." "Too late." Lucian's voice came from below, and she looked down to find him standing in the warehouse, flanked by security, his expression thunderous. "Get down here, now!" She climbed down, and the moment her feet hit the ground, he grabbed her arm and dragged her to a private corner. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm, angry. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking Ivan needed help. Ivan has a team. He has backup. He doesn't need you throwing yourself into the line of fire." His voice was low, controlled, which somehow made it more intense. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't. That's not the point." He released her arm, ran his hand through his hair in frustration. Do you have any idea what it did to me, hearing gunfire over the phone and knowing you were running toward it instead of away? She softened slightly. Lucien, I can't lose you. The words came out raw. I can't. And I can't do my job if I'm constantly terrified you're going to get yourself killed playing hero. I wasn't playing hero. I was doing my job, protecting your interests. Your job is advising me, not engaging in shootouts. My job is whatever needs doing to keep us alive. She met his eyes, and right now, that meant making sure Ivan survived. Would you rather I'd let him die to stay safe? He looked away, jaw tight. Of course not. Then don't be angry at me for doing what you would have done. That's different. How? Because I don't... He stopped, the words catching. Because you matter to me in ways that make me irrational, in ways that make me weak. The admission hung between them, more vulnerable than anything he'd said before. I'm not going to stop being who I am, she said quietly. I can't hide while people I care about are in danger. It's not in me. I know. He pulled her close, held her tight. I know, and it terrifies me, but I also know it's part of why I... He stopped again. Why you what? Why I love you. The words were quiet, almost lost in the sounds of the warehouse being secured around them. Arya's breath caught. They'd danced around this for weeks, acknowledged the connection, the intimacy, but neither had put that name to it. Now it was out there, undeniable. Say something, Lucien said when she didn't respond. I love you too. The words felt foreign, but true. And I'm terrified of it, of what it means, what we could lose. Then we don't lose it. He pulled back to look at her. We fight for it. Together. She kissed him, there in the warehouse with blood still fresh on the concrete and his security team tactfully looking away. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely real. We need to deal with the Petrovs, she said when they broke apart. They're escalating. Let them. His expression hardened back into the crime lord she knew. We'll hit them twice as hard, make it clear that attacking us costs more than they can afford to pay. The retaliation was swift and brutal. Lucien targeted Petrov's supply lines, cutting off their revenue streams. Within a week, they were hemorrhaging money, their organization fracturing under financial pressure. Arya watched it happen with mixed feelings. This was the world she'd chosen, the reality of loving a man who wielded power through violence. She couldn't pretend to be innocent, couldn't maintain moral high ground when she'd helped orchestrate the strategy. Having second thoughts? Lucien asked one evening as they reviewed the damage reports. Always, aren't you? Every day. He set down the papers. But then I think about the alternative, letting threats grow, showing weakness, watching everything collapse. In this world, hesitation kills. And ruthlessness keeps us alive. He looked at her. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine, including you. I'm not yours to protect. No, but you're mine to love, which means I protect you anyway. Deal with it. She should have been annoyed by the possessiveness. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. After years of being alone, having someone who cared enough to be irrationally protective felt like safety, even if it came wrapped in violence. The Petrovs surrendered within 2 weeks. Their leader, Mikhail Petrov, requested a meeting to negotiate terms. Arya accompanied Lucien, watching carefully for signs of treachery. But Mikhail was genuine in his defeat. You win, he said simply. What do you want? Stay out of my territory, completely. And in exchange, I stop dismantling your operation. That's it? That's it. Lucien leaned back. I don't need to destroy you, Mikhail. I just need you to respect boundaries. They shook on it, and another threat was neutralized through a combination of violence and negotiation. The pattern was becoming familiar. That night, lying in bed, Arya stared at the ceiling and tried to reconcile who she'd become with who she'd planned to be. You're thinking too loud, Lucien murmured beside her. Just wondering when I became someone who helps orchestrate gang wars. When you decided survival mattered more than principles? He rolled to face her. We all make compromises, Arya. The question is whether we can live with them. Can you? Some days better than others. He was quiet for a moment. But having you here makes it easier. Makes it feel less like I'm drowning in darkness and more like I have something worth protecting. I'm your anchor to humanity? Something like that. And I'm yours. Proof that monsters can love, that darkness doesn't preclude connection. She turned to him. We're both pretty damaged. Yes, but damage recognizes damage. Maybe that's enough. It was enough. Had to be. Because she was in too deep now to turn back, too invested in this impossible relationship to walk away. 3 months into their relationship, everything felt stable for the first time. Territories were respected, alliances held, threats were minimal. Arya almost allowed herself to relax. That's when everything went wrong. She was doing routine surveillance in the financial district when she saw him, a face from her past, from the life she'd buried. Marcus Reeves' brother, Daniel. He shouldn't have been here. Shouldn't have been anywhere near this city. She'd been so careful, so thorough in erasing her trail. But there he was, talking to someone she recognized from Lucian's organization, making deals, building connections. Her blood turned to ice. She called Lucian immediately. We have a problem. My past just caught up. Lucian arrived within 20 minutes, Ivan close behind. They met in a coffee shop 3 blocks from where Arya had spotted Daniel Reeves, far enough to avoid attention, but close enough to maintain eyes on the target. Tell me everything. Lucian's voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hand rested near his concealed weapon. Daniel Reeves, brother of the man who killed my sister, the man whose death I orchestrated. Arya kept her voice low, aware of the other patrons around them. He swore he'd find whoever was responsible. Looks like he finally did. You're sure it's him? Positive. I spent 8 months studying that family. I know every face. She pulled up a photo on her phone, showed him a surveillance shot she'd taken. And he's meeting with Anton Fedorov, one of your port supervisors. Lucian studied the image, his expression darkening. Fedorov has access to employee records, security protocols, everything. If he's sharing information, then Daniel knows exactly who I am, where I work, and who I work for. Arya felt the old fear rising, the panic she'd kept buried for years. He could expose me, destroy everything. Not everything. Lucian's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Ivan, I need full background on Daniel Reeves. Everything. Finances, associates, where he's staying, why he's in this city. On it. Ivan was already typing on his phone. And Fedorov? Arya asked. We bring him in, quietly. Find out what he's told Daniel, how much damage has been done. Lucian's voice went cold. Then we deal with both problems permanently. You can't just kill them. The words came out sharper than she intended. Daniel has resources, family connections. If he disappears, they'll investigate. And if they find the connection to me, they won't find anything because you don't exist anymore. He met her eyes. Arya Vale is clean, untraceable. Whatever name you used before, that person is dead. Emma Harper. She hadn't said the name out loud in over a year. That was my real name. Emma Harper, sister of Sophie Harper, the woman who helped put Marcus Reeves's enemies on him. Emma Harper doesn't exist anymore, Lucian repeated firmly. She died in a car accident 18 months ago. I made sure of it when I first ran your background. The death certificate, the accident report, everything is legitimate in the databases that matter. She stared at him. You faked my death? I protected an asset. You clearly wanted to disappear. I simply made it more permanent. He didn't sound apologetic. So unless Daniel has proof you survived, which he can't because you didn't exist as Emma when you came here, he's chasing ghosts. He's meeting with Fedorov for a reason, which we'll discover shortly. Lucian's phone buzzed. He read the message, frowned. Ivan's team has Fedorov. He's being brought to the estate now. They left the coffee shop separately, maintaining the careful distance they always kept in public. But Arya's mind was racing, old fears and new dangers colliding. She'd thought she was safe here, thought the past was buried deep enough to never surface. She should have known better. Nothing stayed buried forever. Back at the estate, they found Fedorov in the basement interrogation room, sweating despite the cool temperature. He was mid-30s, nervous energy personified, the kind of man who crumbled under pressure. I didn't do anything, he said immediately when Lucian entered. Whatever you think I did, you met with Daniel Reeves 3 times this week. Lucien sat down across from him, utterly composed. What did you tell him? Nothing. I swear I didn't. Ivan hit him. Not hard, just enough to focus his attention. Let's try again, Lucien said pleasantly. What did you tell him? Fedorov's resistance lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then the truth came spilling out. Daniel had approached him 2 weeks ago, offered money for information about anyone named Emma Harper or anyone who matched her description working in Lucien's organization. I told him we don't have anyone by that name, Fedorov said quickly. Showed him the employee roster, everything. He seemed satisfied. But, Lucien prompted, but then he asked about new hires from the past 2 years. Anyone who came in with minimal background, anyone who seemed like they were running from something. Fedorov glanced at Arya, recognition dawning. I didn't give him your name. I swear I didn't. But I told him we had a few people who fit that profile. How many? 5, including her. He nodded at Arya. But I didn't specify which one he should look at. I just gave him the count. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. What else? He wanted to know about security protocols, who had access to what, how someone could get close to you. Fedorov's voice was shaking now. I didn't give him details. Just general information, the kind of thing anyone could figure out by watching. You sold information about my operation to a stranger for money. Lucien's voice was soft, dangerous. Do you understand what that makes you? I'm sorry. He offered 50,000. I have debts, gambling debts, and I thought, you thought wrong. Lucien stood. Ivan, hold him here. I need to think about this. Outside the interrogation room, Arya leaned against the wall, trying to process. He narrowed it down to 5 people. Daniel will investigate all of them, which means eventually he'll get to me. Then we move first. Lucien pulled out his phone, started typing. Ivan's already pulling files on Daniel Reeves. We'll know everything about him by tonight, where he's staying, what he's doing here, who else he's talked to. And then what? We kill him and hope his family doesn't come looking? We figure out what he wants. Everyone wants something. Lucien looked at her directly. What does Daniel Reeves want, Arya? Revenge for his brother? Justice? Money? She thought about it, remembering the news coverage of Marcus Reeves' death, the family's grief and rage. Revenge. He loved his brother, believed Marcus was a good man who was set up by lies. He wants whoever destroyed Marcus to pay. Then we give him someone to blame, someone who isn't you. You mean frame someone else? The idea felt wrong, even in this world where morality was already so compromised. I mean, we tell him a story that satisfies his need for revenge while protecting you. Lucien was already working through the strategy. Marcus Reeves was involved in criminal activity. His enemies were numerous. We simply point Daniel toward one of them, make it convincing enough that he stops looking elsewhere. That's... She stopped. It was brilliant. It was horrible. It was exactly the kind of calculated manipulation that kept them alive in this world. What if he doesn't believe it? Then we make it too expensive for him to keep digging, apply pressure until he decides revenge isn't worth the cost. His expression hardened. One way or another, this threat ends. I won't let your past destroy what we've built. Even returned with a tablet, information already compiled. Daniel Reeves, 38, investment banker from Boston. Took leave from his firm 3 months ago, officially for personal reasons. Unofficially, he's been conducting a private investigation into his brother's death. What's he found? Lucien asked. More than we'd like. He's traced payments from Marcus's business rivals, identified several people who benefited from Marcus's death. Ivan scrolled through the data. He's smart, methodical, and he's convinced someone orchestrated everything. Because someone did. Arya felt the weight of her past pressing down. I did. Emma Harper did, Lucien corrected. You're not her anymore. But she was, wasn't she? You couldn't shed your past like a snake shedding skin. It stayed with you, shaped you, defined the choices you made. He's staying at the Grand Sterling Hotel, Ivan continued. Suite 412. Has a rental car, minimal security. He's not expecting trouble. Good. Lucien was already planning. Arya, I need you to tell me everything you can remember about Marcus Reeves's enemies. Anyone who benefited from his death, anyone who had motive to want him gone. She spent the next 2 hours going through her memory, reconstructing the network of people she'd manipulated into destroying Marcus. There had been business rivals, men he'd cheated in deals. There had been criminals whose operations he'd interfered with. And there had been James Carmichael, a man whose daughter Marcus had briefly dated before moving on to Sophie. Carmichael, she said slowly. He blamed Marcus for his daughter's suicide attempt. She'd gotten involved with drugs during their relationship, spiraled badly after Marcus dumped her. James never forgave him. Did Carmichael have the resources to orchestrate Marcus's death? Lucian asked. Yes. He ran a private security firm, had connections to less savory operations. When I approached him with evidence of Marcus's involvement in his daughter's decline, she paused, remembering. He was the one who actually arranged Marcus's death. I just provided the information and the motive. Perfect. Lucian exchanged a look with Ivan. We point Daniel at Carmichael. Provide evidence that Carmichael acted alone, driven by grief and revenge. It's believable, it's clean, and it takes suspicion away from you. Carmichael is still alive. He'll deny it. Then we make sure the evidence is too strong to deny. Plan additional documentation, create a trail that leads directly to him. Lucien's voice was a matter of fact, like they were discussing a business strategy rather than framing someone for murder. By the time we're done, Daniel will be convinced Carmichael was responsible. Arya knew she should feel guilty. Carmichael had helped her when she needed it, had believed in justice for his daughter. Now she was going to throw him to the wolves to save herself. But survival had never been clean. She'd learned that years ago. Do it, she said quietly. The operation took 3 days to set up. Ivan's team created a paper trail, financial transactions showing payments from Carmichael to the men who'd killed Marcus, communications that implied planning and coordination, even a fake journal entry where Carmichael supposedly confessed his role. It was thorough, professional, and completely fabricated. Meanwhile, they kept surveillance on Daniel Reeves, watching his movements, learning his patterns. He was investigating the 5 potential matches Fedorov had mentioned, spending time near their homes and workplaces trying to find evidence. He'd already eliminated 2. 3 remained, including Arya. He's getting close, Ivan reported on the 3rd day. He's been watching the estate, taking photos. He knows you work here. Then it's time to redirect his attention. Lucian made a call, his voice smooth and professional. Mr. Reeves? This is Lucian Varick. I understand you've been asking questions about my organization. I think we should talk. Arya listened to his side of the conversation, watched him work. He was offering Daniel a meeting, positioning it as a businessman annoyed by scrutiny but willing to address concerns, making himself seem transparent, unthreatening. Daniel agreed to meet that evening. You're not going alone, Osh, Arya said when Lucian ended the call. Of course not. You'll be there, along with Ivan and security. He looked at her carefully. Can you handle seeing him face to face? I don't have a choice, do I? There's always a choice. I can handle this without you. No. She straightened her spine, forced confidence she didn't feel. I need to be there, need to see this through. The meeting was set for a restaurant downtown, another neutral location with enough public presence to discourage violence. They arrived first, secured the perimeter, established clear exit routes. When Daniel Reeves walked in, Arya felt her breath catch. He looked so much like Marcus. Same sharp features, same cold eyes. But where Marcus had radiated charm and manipulation, Daniel just looked tired, driven by grief that had aged him beyond his years. Mr. Varick. Daniel took the offered seat, his gaze sweeping the table, lingering on Arya. And you are? My security consultant, Lucian said smoothly. She accompanies me to all meetings. I see. Oh, Daniel's attention returned to Lucian. I appreciate you agreeing to meet. I know my questions have been intrusive. You're looking for your brother's killer. I understand the motivation. Lucian's voice was sympathetic, almost kind. I lost my father to violence. I know what that drive for answers feels like. Daniel seemed to relax slightly. Then you understand why I can't let this go. Marcus was murdered, and the police called it suicide. I know better. I'm sure you do. Lucian signaled the waiter, ordered drinks. What makes you think my organization has anything to do with it? I'm following a trail. Someone orchestrated Marcus's death. used his enemies against him, that someone had to have resources, connections, the ability to manipulate powerful people. Daniel leaned forward. Your organization fits that profile. So do a dozen others in this city. Lucien accepted his drink, sipped it. Why focus on me? Because I've traced financial movements, communications, patterns, and they lead here. Arya forced herself to stay calm, her face neutral. Daniel was smart, thorough. He'd found more than they'd anticipated. Interesting. Lucien set down his glass. And what do you plan to do with this theory? Find proof, then make sure whoever killed Marcus pays. Noble, but misguided. Lucien pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. I had my people look into your brother's death after you started asking questions. Professional curiosity. What we found might interest you. Daniel opened the folder, started reading. Arya watched his expression shift from curiosity to shock to rage. James Carmichael, he breathed. Sarah's father. The timeline fits, Lucien said. Sarah Carmichael's suicide attempt happened 6 months before your brother's death. James had motive, means, and opportunity. The financial records show payments to known criminals. The communications show planning. He orchestrated everything. This is... Daniel looked up. How did you get this information? I have resources you don't. And unlike you, I'm not bound by legal constraints. Lucien's voice was smooth. The question is, what will you do with it? Daniel stared at the documents, his hands shaking slightly. Carmichael. It was Carmichael all along. Arya felt a twist of guilt watching him believe the lie. But she pushed it down, buried it with all the other compromises she'd made. I can provide additional evidence if needed, Lucien offered, but I'd advise caution. James Carmichael is a dangerous man with powerful connections. Going after him directly could get you killed. I don't care. Daniel's voice was hard. If he killed Marcus, he'll answer for it. Then at least be smart about it. Use the legal system. Provide this evidence to investigators who can build a case. Lucien leaned back. Or take matters into your own hands, but do it carefully. Don't let grief make you reckless. They talked for another 30 minutes, Lucien carefully steering the conversation, reinforcing the narrative. By the end, Daniel Reeves was convinced James Carmichael was responsible for his brother's death. As he left, folder clutched in his hand, Arya felt the tension drain from her body. He bought it, Ivan said quietly. Of course he did. We gave him what he needed, a target for his rage, evidence that confirms his suspicions. Lucien watched Daniel disappear into the night. Now we wait and see what he does with it. What if he goes to the police? Then Carmichael gets arrested, which removes him as a threat to everyone. If he takes justice into his own hands, same result. Either way, Daniel stops looking for Emma Harper. Lucien turned to Arya. You're safe. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. We just destroyed an innocent man's life. Carmichael isn't innocent. He killed Marcus Reeves even if the motive we provided was fabricated. Lucien's voice was firm. And he'll face consequences he was always going to face eventually. We just accelerated the timeline. That's rationalization. That's survival. He took her hand. In this world, you protect what matters. You matter. So I protected you. Back at the estate, Arya stood in Lucien's office while he poured them both drinks. What happens to Fedorov? He betrayed my trust, sold information that could have gotten you killed. Lucien handed her a glass. What do you think should happen? I think he made a stupid mistake driven by desperation. She met his eyes. I think killing him sends a message, but also creates problems. His family will ask questions. Authorities might investigate. And your recommendation? Fire him. Blacklist him from working in the industry. Make sure everyone knows he can't be trusted. She took a sip. It's punishment enough, and it doesn't create the complications a body would. Lucien considered this. You're getting soft. I'm getting strategic. There's a difference. He smiled. Ivan won't like it. He thinks Fedorov should disappear. Ivan thinks everyone should disappear. That's his solution to every problem. Fair point. Lucien pulled out his phone, sent a message. Done. Fedorov gets fired, blacklisted, and a warning that if he ever speaks about this organization, the consequences will be permanent. Thank you. Don't thank me. You're right that killing him causes more problems than it solves. I'm just following sound advice. He set down his phone, moved closer. How are you holding up? Honestly, I don't know. Arya felt the weight of the past few days settling on her. I thought I'd escaped this. Thought Emma Harper was dead and buried. But here she is, still causing problems, still putting people at risk. She saved your life once. Now we've saved her memory by putting Daniel on the wrong trail. Lucienne pulled her close. You're allowed to have a past, Arya. We all do. What matters is that we don't let it destroy our present. She leaned into him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. What if Daniel figures out the truth? What if he realizes we manipulated him? Then we deal with it, together. His voice was firm, but I don't think he will. People believe what they want to believe, and we gave him a target that makes sense, that satisfies his need for justice. 2 weeks passed. Daniel Reeves left the city, presumably to pursue James Carmichael. Ivan's sources reported that Daniel had provided the fabricated evidence to federal investigators, who were now looking into Carmichael's activities. The heat was off. Arya could breathe again. But something had changed. She found herself thinking about the cost of survival, about all the small compromises that added up to a completely compromised life. They'd framed an innocent man, manipulated a grieving brother, and she'd justified it all in the name of staying alive. You're distant, Lucian observed one evening. They were in his room, supposedly reviewing security reports, but she'd been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. Just thinking? About? About whether I'm the same as Marcus Reeves, whether I've become the kind of person who destroys lives to protect myself. Lucian set aside his own papers. You're nothing like Marcus Reeves. How do you know? You never met him. Because Marcus enjoyed causing pain. You're tormented by it. He moved to sit beside her. There's a difference between doing difficult things to survive and doing them because you like it. Is there? Or is that just another rationalization? It's the truth. His voice was gentle but firm. You have empathy, conscience, guilt. Those things matter. They're what separate necessary evil from actual evil. And what about you? She looked at him directly. Do you feel guilt for the things you've done? Every day. The honesty in his voice surprised her. I've ordered deaths, destroyed families, built an empire on other people's suffering. I tell myself it's necessary, that it's the nature of this world, but late at night when I can't sleep, I know better. I know exactly what I am. What are you? A monster trying to be a man, failing at both, probably. He smiled without humor. But with you, I feel more human. More like there's something worth protecting beyond just power and territory. She kissed him then, a desperate need to feel connected, to prove they were more than the sum of their crimes. He responded immediately, and they lost themselves in each other, seeking comfort and intimacy. Afterward, lying in the darkness, she whispered, What if we left? Just disappeared? Started over somewhere new? We'd be dead within 6 months, Lucian said, not unkindly. I have too many enemies, too much blood on my hands. The moment I showed weakness by running, they'd hunt me down. So we're trapped here. We're committed here. There's a difference. He pulled her closer. But if you want to leave, if this life is too much, where would I go? She laughed bitterly. I'm in as deep as you are now. Emma Harper is dead. Arya Vale only exists in your world. I don't have anywhere else to be. That's not true. I could set you up somewhere safe. New identity, clean start. Stop. She turned to face him. I'm not leaving you. I'm just processing, coming to terms with who I've become. And who have you become? Someone who survives. Someone who protects the people she loves, even when the cost is high. She traced the scar on his shoulder. Someone who understands that good and evil aren't as clear as I once thought. Welcome to moral ambiguity, he said dryly. Population, everyone in this world. Despite everything, she smiled. He had a way of making darkness feel bearable, making impossible situations seem manageable. The next morning brought new problems. Marco Calabrese, Giovanni's reckless son, had been found dead in his apartment. Apparent suicide, but the timing was suspicious. Thoughts? Lucian asked when Yvonne brought the news. Arya studied the report. He was banned from the ports. humiliated in front of his family. Young men with pride issues don't typically kill themselves over that. They plot revenge. So someone killed him and made it look like suicide. Someone who wanted to send a message or eliminate a future threat. She looked up. Giovanni is going to think we did this. Even though we had no reason to, Marco was contained, neutralized. Killing him would just restart conflict. Lucien was already thinking through implications, which means someone else did this to frame us, to break our peace with the Calabrese family. The question is, who benefits from renewed conflict between you and Giovanni? They spent the afternoon investigating, pulling in favors, questioning sources. The answer came from an unexpected place. Marco's own girlfriend, who tearfully admitted he'd been planning something stupid with the Volkov family, a smaller operation trying to establish themselves by picking fights with established powers. The Volkovs promised to help him get revenge on you, Yvonne reported. But when Marco started getting cold feet, started thinking about his father's wishes for peace, they killed him, made it look like suicide, figured we'd take the blame and Giovanni would declare war. Clever, Lucien admitted. If crude, they underestimated how quickly we'd investigate. What do we do? Arya asked. We tell Giovanni the truth before he hears lies. Show him the evidence. Let him decide how to respond. Lucien stood, already making calls. And then we have a conversation with the Volkov family about the consequences of manipulating our alliances. The meeting with Giovanni was tense. The old man was grieving, angry, looking for someone to blame. But Lucien presented the evidence carefully, showed him the communications between Marco and the Volkovs, provided proof of their involvement. My son was foolish, Giovanni said quietly, staring at the documents. But he didn't deserve this. No, he didn't, Lucien agreed, and the people responsible will answer for it. You have my word. What do you want from me? I want to maintain our peace. I want the Volkovs to understand they can't manipulate us into fighting each other. Lucien's voice was firm. And I want your permission to send that message decisively. Giovanni looked at him for a long moment. You're asking if you can go after them. I'm asking if we can go after them, together. Show the entire city that our alliance is stronger than some upstart family's schemes. It was risky. Involving Giovanni meant sharing power, acknowledging him as an equal. But Arya could see the strategy. This wasn't just about the Volkovs. This was about solidifying the peace, about proving that Lucien valued alliances over domination. Together, Giovanni said finally, extending his hand. They shook, and another crisis was averted through transparency and strategic partnership. The Volkov family lasted less than a week after that. Combined pressure from Lucien and Giovanni crushed them financially, politically, and finally physically. The leaders were arrested on charges that would keep them in prison for decades. The soldiers scattered, absorbed into other organizations, or left the city entirely. It was brutal, efficient, and sent exactly the message Lucien intended. Attacking his alliances had worse consequences than attacking him directly. You're getting good at this, Arya told him afterward. At what? Orchestrating gang wars? At building something more than just power. You're creating a network, not an empire. People who work with you instead of for you. That's your influence, he said. Before you, I would have just destroyed the Volkovs and dared Giovanni to object. Now I'm thinking about long-term stability instead of short-term dominance. Is that good or bad? Ask me in 5 years. But he smiled. Though I suspect it's good, empires fall. Networks adapt. That night, Arya received a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Thank you, Daniel. She stared at it for a long time. Daniel Reeves thanking her. Presumably, James Carmichael had been arrested, or worse. The fabricated evidence had done its job. She deleted the message without responding. Everything okay? Lucien asked, noticing her expression. Fine. Just ghosts from the past making peace. Good ghosts or bad ghosts? Does it matter? They're all dead now. She set down her phone. Emma Harper, Sophie, Marcus Reeves, even James Carmichael in his own way. All dead or might as well be. And Arya Vale? She's here, living in a morally complicated world with a man she loves, despite knowing better. She moved to him, wrapped her arms around his waist. She's surviving, which is more than she ever expected to do. He held her close, and for a moment, the world outside didn't matter. The violence, the manipulation, the constant threat, all of it faded into background noise. This was real. This connection, this understanding, this impossible love built on shared darkness. It was real, and it was enough. Outside, the city sprawled in all its corrupt beauty. Territories were drawn and redrawn, alliances formed and broken. Violence bubbled beneath the surface of legitimate society. But in this room, in this moment, Arya felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wouldn't last. Peace never did in their world. But for now, it was enough to hold on to believe in, to fight for when the inevitable threats emerged. And they would emerge. She knew that with bone-deep certainty. Daniel Reeves might be satisfied, but there would be others. There always were. But she'd face them. They'd face them together. Because that was what survival meant in this world, finding someone who understood your darkness and chose to stay anyway. I love you, she said quietly. I love you too. His arms tightened around her. Wes, whatever comes next, we handle it together. Together, she agreed. It was a promise and a threat, to each other, to their enemies, to the world that kept trying to tear them apart. They were damaged, dangerous, and deeply in love. And somehow, against all logic and morality, it worked. For now, that was enough. The peace lasted exactly 6 weeks. Arya was reviewing shipping manifests in Lucian's office when Ivan burst through the door without knocking, his face ashen in a way she'd never seen before. We have a situation. His voice was tight, controlled panic barely contained. The Kozlov brothers just hit 3 of our operations simultaneously. The warehouse on 5th, the distribution center in Brooklyn, and the container yard at the port. Lucien was on his feet immediately. Casualties? 12 dead, maybe more. They came in heavy, professional, military-grade weapons, coordinated assault. Ivan pulled up security footage on his tablet. This wasn't a warning. This was a declaration of war. Arya watched the grainy footage, her tactical mind automatically cataloging details. The attackers moved with precision, covering angles, neutralizing resistance efficiently. These weren't street thugs or desperate criminals. These were trained operators. The Kozlov brothers, she said slowly. I don't know them. Eastern European operation, been growing quietly for the past year. Lucien's voice was ice. I've been watching them, but considered them contained. Clearly, I was wrong. They want the ports, Ivan said. This is their opening move. Hit us hard, make us look weak, then offer to negotiate from a position of strength. How many men do they have? Arya asked. At least 50, maybe more. Plus they've got connections to overseas operations, access to weapons and resources we can't match directly. Ivan looked grim. They're not playing by the usual rules. Lucien was quiet, thinking. Arya could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing options, considering angles. This was different from the Petrovs, from the Volkovs, from all the previous threats. This was existential. Call everyone in, Lucien said finally. Every ally we have, every favor we're owed. If the Kozlov brothers want war, we'll give them one they can't win. The next 72 hours were chaos. Meetings with allies, strategies debated and discarded, resources mobilized. Arya barely slept, running on coffee and adrenaline, watching Lucien transform from the man she loved into the crime lord who'd built an empire. It was terrifying and impressive in equal measure. We hit them at their supply lines, she suggested during one strategy session. They're bringing in weapons from overseas. Cut off that supply, and they're fighting with what they have now. No reinforcements, no resupply. How do we do that? Giovanni Calabrese asked. He was there along with Sergei from the Russian family, Dmitry Kozlov, their former enemy, now reluctant ally, and several others. The room was packed with dangerous men, all united by a common threat. We have contacts in customs, in port authority, Arya said, surprised at how easily she spoke in front of these men now. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was helping plan a war. We flag their shipments, delay them, make it too expensive and risky to continue operations. That's long-term strategy, Dmitry rumbled. We need short-term solutions. They killed 12 of our people. That demands immediate response. Immediate response gets more people killed, Lucian countered. They're expecting us to react emotionally, to hit back hard and fast. That's when we'd be vulnerable. So we do nothing? Sergei sounded incredulous. We do something smart. Lucian looked at Arya. What else do you see? She'd been studying intelligence reports on the Kozlov brothers for hours, looking for patterns, weaknesses. They're aggressive, confident, but they're also new to this city. They don't have the deep relationships we have, the embedded connections. They're relying on fear and firepower. Which works until it doesn't, Lucian said, following her logic. Exactly. So we make it not work. We fortify our positions, we protect our people, and we isolate them. Make every operation they try cost more than it's worth. Drain their resources, their morale, their support. A siege, Giovanni said, understanding. We starve them out. While hitting their supply lines, Arya added, and their reputation. We make sure everyone in this city knows that attacking us means destruction. Not quick, not clean, but absolute. It was ruthless. It was calculated. It was exactly the kind of strategy that would work. I like it, Dmitri said grudgingly. But it requires patience, coordination. Can we maintain that? All eyes turned to Lucien. He looked around the room, meeting each man's gaze in turn. We can. Because the alternative is watching everything we've built burn. The Kozlov brothers think they can waltz into our city and take what's ours through superior firepower. We're going to teach them that power isn't just about guns. It's about influence, patience, and the willingness to outlast your enemy. They voted. It was unanimous. Over the next 2 weeks, Arya watched their plan unfold with brutal efficiency. The Kozlov brothers tried to hit another warehouse and found it empty. They'd been fed false intelligence about what was stored there. They attempted to recruit street-level dealers and found them already loyal to Lucian's network. Their weapons shipments got held up in customs, buried under red tape that would take months to clear. Meanwhile, Lucian's organization tightened security, fortified positions, and waited. They're getting desperate, Yvonne reported at one of their daily briefings. They've lost 3 of their own people to internal disputes, and 2 more got arrested on charges we helped arrange. Good. Well, Lucian didn't look up from the documents he was reviewing. Keep the pressure on. I want them bleeding resources every day. Arya sat beside him, equally focused on her own work, coordinating with their various informants, tracking the Kozlov brothers' movements, predicting their next moves. It had become her specialty, this tactical analysis, and she was good at it. Too good, maybe. Sometimes she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Where had the waitress gone? Where had Emma Harper disappeared to? You're thinking too loud again, Lucian said without looking up. Just wondering when I became a strategist in a gang war. You've always been a strategist. You just didn't have the resources to execute before. He set down his papers, finally giving her his full attention. Having second thoughts? Always. But also no. She smiled without humor. Is that contradictory enough? In this world, it's perfectly logical. He reached for her hand, squeezed once. We're going to survive this, Arya. Together. She wanted to believe him. But she'd seen the intelligence reports, knew the Kozlov brothers had more resources than they'd initially estimated. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The turning point came 3 weeks into the conflict. Arya was doing routine surveillance in the financial district when she saw something that made her blood run cold. One of the Kozlov brothers, Nikolai, the younger one, was meeting with someone she recognized. A federal agent she'd seen in case files, someone Ivan had flagged as particularly dangerous. She called Lucien immediately. We have a problem. Nikolai Kozlov is meeting with Agent Sarah Chen from the Organized Crime Task Force. Silence on the other end. Then, you're sure? Positive. I'm looking at them right now, sitting in a cafe on Madison. The Kozlov brothers are cooperating with federal authorities. Lucien's voice was grim. They're offering to turn evidence in exchange for immunity. Can they hurt us? If they've been documenting our operations? Yes, significantly. She could hear him thinking. Where are you exactly? She gave him the location. What do you want me to do? Watch them. Don't engage. Don't get close. Just observe and report. She did for the next 40 minutes, watching Nikolai Kozlov and Agent Chen talk over coffee like old friends. She couldn't hear the conversation, but body language told her plenty. Nikolai was nervous, eager to please. Agent Chen was controlled, professional, clearly in charge. This was bad, really bad. When the meeting broke up, Arya followed Agent Chen at a distance, watching where she went, who she talked to. Standard surveillance, the kind she'd gotten good at over the past months. She didn't notice the tail behind her until it was almost too late. A black SUV pulled up beside her as she walked. The door opened and a voice said, "Get in, Miss Vale. We need to talk." Arya's hand went to her weapon, but she was already surrounded, 2 men behind her, 2 more emerging from the SUV. Professional, coordinated, exactly like the Kozlov attacks. "I'd rather not," she said calmly, her mind racing through options. She was outnumbered in public, but not public enough for witnesses to matter. It wasn't a request. The man in the SUV was older, hard-eyed, with the bearing of someone used to command. "Viktor Kozlov, I believe you've been interfering with my operations." The older brother, the smart one. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Please, we both know exactly what you're talking about." He gestured impatiently. "Get in. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. I want to talk." It was stupid. It was dangerous. It was also possibly her only way out of this situation alive. She got in. The SUV started moving immediately, the men who'd surrounded her disappearing into other vehicles. Viktor Kozlov studied her with interest. "You're the one who's been reading our operations," he said, "predicting our moves, countering our strategies. Lucien Varick's secret weapon." "I'm just an analyst. You're much more than that. I've done my research, Miss Vale. Or should I call you Emma Harper?" Her heart stopped. "I don't know who that is." "Of course you don't, because Emma Harper died in a car accident. Very tragic, very convenient." Victor smiled. "But we both know the truth, don't we? You helped destroy Marcus Reeves, then disappeared, created a new identity, buried yourself in Varick's organization." "What do you want?" She kept her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I want to offer you a choice." He leaned back, perfectly relaxed. "My brother is making a deal with federal authorities. He's going to testify against Varick, provide evidence that will bring down his entire operation. When that happens, everyone connected to Varick goes down too, including you. Unless you work for me instead. Help me finish what we started, take over Varick's territory, his operations, his network. In exchange, I protect you. New identity, complete protection, a position of real power instead of being someone's kept analyst." Arya felt rage building underneath the fear. "You're asking me to betray Lucien. I'm asking you to survive. Varick's empire is falling. The federal case will destroy him. You can go down with him out of misplaced loyalty, or you can save yourself." Victor's voice was reasonable, almost kind. "I know your history, Emma. You're a survivor. You do what's necessary to stay alive. This is just another necessary choice. And if I refuse? Then I tell Agent Chen exactly who you are, what you did. Emma Harper becomes a person of interest in a murder investigation. Your new life, your new identity, all of it collapses." He shrugged. "Or you could end up like Marcus Reeves, convenient suicide, case closed." The threat was clear. Work for him or die. Those were her options. "I need time to think," she said. "You have 24 hours. He pulled out a phone, handed it to her. "This is untraceable. Call the only number in it when you've decided. If I don't hear from you by this time tomorrow, I'll assume you've chosen poorly." The SUVs stopped. They were back where they'd grabbed her, like the whole conversation had been a fever dream. 24 hours, Miss Vale. Choose wisely." She got out, and the SUV disappeared into traffic. Arya stood on the sidewalk, shaking, the burner phone heavy in her pocket. She should call Lucien immediately, tell him everything, but Victor's words echoed in her mind. The federal case. Evidence, testimony. What if he was right? What if Lucien's empire was about to fall? She walked for an hour, thinking, before finally calling. Not Lucien. Even. "I need information," she said when he answered. The federal investigation into Lucien. How serious is it? Ivan was quiet for a long moment. How did you know about that? How serious, Ivan? Serious. They've been building a case for months. If they have inside testimony, someone with detailed knowledge of operations. He trailed off. It could be devastating. Why didn't Lucien tell me? He didn't want you to worry, thought he could handle it quietly. Of course he did, protecting her even when it meant keeping her in the dark about threats that could destroy them both. I'm coming in, she said. We need to talk. All of us. When she arrived at the estate, Lucien took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. He dismissed everyone else, leaving just the two of them in his office. What happened? She told him everything. Victor's ambush, the offer, the threats, the burner phone currently sitting like a bomb in her pocket. Lucien listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. He's right about the federal case, he said finally. Nikolai Kozlov is cooperating. We've known for a week. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you, keep you separate from the worst of it, so if things went bad, I could what? Walk away clean? Arya felt anger rising. I'm in this as deep as you are, Lucien. You don't get to protect me by keeping me ignorant. I was trying to give you options. I don't want options. I want the truth. She moved closer, forced him to look at her. What's the actual situation? No protection, no sugarcoating? The truth. He met her eyes, and she saw the exhaustion there, the weight he'd been carrying alone. If Nikolai testifies with the evidence he has, I'm looking at federal charges, racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. 20 years minimum, probably life. And everyone connected to you? Goes down too. Ivan, my security team, business associates, anyone who can be proven to have knowledge of illegal operations. He paused. Including you. So Victor wasn't lying. Your empire is falling. Not falling. Under attack. There's a difference. His voice hardened. I'm working on solutions. Leverage against the federal prosecutors. Ways to discredit Nikolai's testimony. Potential deals. What if there are no solutions? She had to ask. What if this is it? Then I go down fighting, but I won't take you with me. He took her hands. That phone Victor gave you. Use it. Make the deal. Save yourself. She stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. If working for Victor keeps you safe, keeps you out of prison, then do it. You want me to betray you. I want you to survive. His voice cracked slightly. I've done a lot of terrible things in my life, Arya, but I won't add your destruction to that list. If there's a way to save you, even if it costs me everything, I'll take it. She pulled her hands away, pacing the office. This is insane. You're talking about sacrificing yourself. I'm talking about priorities. You matter more than my pride, more than my empire. And what if I don't want to be saved at your expense? She spun to face him. What if I'd rather go down fighting beside you than live knowing I betrayed you? That's not rational. Love isn't rational. The words came out sharp, desperate. You think I can just walk away, work for the man trying to destroy you, and live with that? You've survived worse. Not like this. Not betraying someone I... Her voice broke. I can't do it, Lucien. I won't. He crossed to her, pulled her close. She felt him trembling slightly, the fear he never showed anyone else leaking through. Then what do we do? He whispered. She thought about it, her tactical mind working through options, angles, possibilities. Victor expected her to either betray Lucien or refuse and face consequences. Those were the obvious choices. But there was a third option, a dangerous one. We use Victor's offer against him, she said slowly. I tell him I'll work for him. Get close, gather intelligence on his operations, find out exactly what evidence Nikolai has and how to discredit it. That's dangerous, stupid, likely to get me killed, I know. She looked up at him. But it's also our best shot. The Kozlov brothers think they've won. They're not expecting us to infiltrate their operation from the inside. You'd be completely exposed. No backup, no protection. If they figure out you're playing them, then I'll improvise. Like I always do. She smiled without humor. Besides, they already think I'm a survivor who does whatever's necessary. I'll just give them what they expect. Lucien was quiet, considering. She could see him hating the idea, hating the risk to her, but also recognizing the strategic value. If we do this, he said carefully, you need to be completely convincing, which means I need to act like you've actually betrayed me. Publicly break with me. Make it look real. It would destroy our relationship in the eyes of everyone who matters. My allies would see you as a traitor. Your protection within my organization would disappear. But it would convince Victor, and that's what matters. She stepped back, creating distance. We have 24 hours. Let's make them count. They spent the night planning every detail. How Arya would approach Victor, what information she'd offer, how she'd maintain the deception. It was intricate, dangerous, and depended on dozens of things going exactly right. Last chance to back out, Lucian said as dawn broke over the city. We can find another way. There is no other way, we both know it. She picked up the burner phone Victor had given her. Time to make the call. Victor answered on the first ring. Miss Vale, I was hoping to hear from you. I'm in, she said, making her voice sound defeated, desperate. But I have conditions. Such as? Complete immunity, new identity after this is over, and 50,000 up front. Victor laughed. Pragmatic. I like that. Fine. All agreed. Where and when? They set a meeting for that evening. After Arya hung up, she looked at Lucy and saw the pain in his eyes. We have to make the break public, she said, before I meet with him. It has to be believable. I know. He crossed to his desk, pulled out a file. Ivan compiled this. Evidence of your real identity, your past, everything. I'm going to discover it, confront you, throw you out. In front of witnesses. The entire inner circle. Ivan, key lieutenants, allies. Everyone who needs to believe this is real. His voice was hollow. They'll hate you. Some might try to kill you. I'll manage. She took the file, looked through it. Emma Harper's history, Sophie's death, Marcus Reeves, all of it laid out in stark detail. This is thorough. I've known most of it for months. I just never... He trailed off. Never weaponized it. Until now. They stood there looking at each other, knowing what was coming. In a few hours, they'd destroy their relationship in the eyes of everyone who mattered. Arya would become a traitor, an enemy, someone to be hunted. And if she survived Viktor Kozlov's organization long enough to gather the intelligence they needed, if she managed to pull off this deception without getting killed, maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to save everything. I love you, Lucienne said quietly. No matter what happens next, no matter what I have to say or do, remember that. I love you too. She kissed him, knowing it might be the last time for a very long while. Don't hold back tonight. Make it convincing. I will. He pulled her close one final time. And Arya? If something goes wrong, if Victor figures it out, I know, save myself. Don't worry about anything else. She smiled sadly. I'm a survivor, remember? It's what I do. That evening, Lucien called a meeting of his entire inner circle. 20 people packed into the conference room, all the key players in his organization. Arya stood to his right, her usual position, trying not to show the fear churning in her gut. I've discovered something disturbing, Lucien began, his voice cold in a way she'd never heard directed at her. Something that affects all of us. He threw the file down on the table. Photos spilled out. Emma Harper's driver's license, pictures of Sophie, documentation of Marcus Reeves' death. Arya Vale isn't who she says she is. Her real name is Emma Harper. She's wanted in connection with a murder in Boston, and she's been lying to us from the beginning. The room erupted. Questions, accusations, shock. Ivan looked genuinely surprised, which meant Lucien hadn't told him about the plan, making it more believable. I can explain, Arya started, making her voice shake. Explain what? That you've been using a false identity? That you're a fugitive? Lucian's voice cut through the noise. How long have you been planning to betray us? Were you working for the Koslov brothers from the start? No, I would never Get out. The words were quiet but absolute. Get out of my house, out of my organization. You're done here. Lucienne, please. I said get out. He moved toward her, and she flinched, making it look real. And if I ever see you again, I won't be this merciful. You understand? She nodded, grabbed her bag, and ran. Out of the conference room, through the mansion, past security, who now looked at her with hatred instead of respect. She made it to her car before the tears came. But they weren't all fake. Part of her was genuinely devastated, even knowing this was theater, even knowing it was necessary. 2 hours later, she met Viktor Kozlov in a warehouse on the east side. She looked appropriately destroyed. Makeup smeared from crying, hands shaking, the picture of a woman who'd lost everything. "He threw you out," Viktor said, not quite hiding his satisfaction. "He found out about Emma Harper, about Boston." She made her voice bitter. "Everything I did to protect myself, and he uses it against me." "Welcome to our world. Loyalty is a lie we tell ourselves to feel better." Viktor gestured to a chair. "Sit. Let's discuss your new position." She sat and began the most dangerous performance of her life. Victor's operation was different from Lucien's in every way that mattered. Where Lucien built alliances, Viktor demanded submission. Where Lucien valued loyalty, Viktor relied on fear. Arya saw it within the first week. The tension among his people, the way they looked over their shoulders, the constant undercurrent of violence waiting to erupt. She played her role carefully. The bitter ex-lover, the opportunist who'd chosen survival over sentiment. Viktor seemed to buy it, giving her access to strategic planning sessions, letting her review operational details. "You're good at this," he said during one meeting, watching her analyze a proposed expansion into Lucien's remaining territory. "Varric was stupid to throw you away." "Varric was sentimental," she replied, keeping her voice cold. "Sentiment is weakness in this world." "Exactly right." Viktor smiled, and it reminded her of a shark. "That's why he's losing and we're winning." But they weren't winning. Not really. Arya could see the cracks in Viktor's operation. The financial strain of their aggressive expansion, the resentment building among forced allies, the federal investigation that Nikolai's cooperation hadn't actually stopped. She fed information to Lucien through a dead drop they'd arranged, a specific park bench where she'd leave coded messages hidden in a hollowed-out book. It was old-fashioned, untraceable, and effective. 3 weeks into her infiltration, she finally got what they needed. Viktor's younger brother Nikolai was keeping detailed records of his cooperation with federal authorities, insurance in case Viktor turned on him. The files were stored on a laptop in Nikolai's apartment, backed up nowhere else because he didn't trust cloud storage. Arya left the information at the dead drop along with Nikolai's security schedule. 2 days later, the laptop disappeared during what looked like a random burglary. Nikolai reported it to Viktor, furious, but there was nothing to be done. Without those files, without concrete documentation, Nikolai's testimony became much less credible. The federal case didn't collapse entirely, but it weakened significantly. "Someone's sabotaging us," Nikolai raged during a meeting Arya attended. "First the weapons shipments, now this. We have a leak." Viktor's eyes swept the room, landing on each person in turn. When his gaze reached Arya, she met it steadily, letting just enough fear show to be believable, but not enough to seem guilty. "We'll find them," Viktor said quietly, "and when we do, they'll wish they'd never been born." That night, Arya was walking to her car when she felt the tail. 2 men, professional, keeping distance but definitely following. Viktor was having her watched, testing her loyalty. She led them on a deliberately mundane route. Grocery store, dry cleaners, back to the small apartment Viktor had provided. Nothing suspicious, nothing that would raise alarms, but her heart was racing the entire time, knowing how close she was to exposure. Inside the apartment, she found a gift waiting, a box on the kitchen counter, wrapped in black paper. No card, no note. Her instincts screamed danger, but she couldn't not open it. That would be more suspicious than the alternative. Inside was Sophie's necklace, the one she'd been wearing when Marcus Reeves killed her, the one that had been logged as evidence and then disappeared into some police storage facility. Underneath it, a note in Viktor's handwriting. "I know who you really are. We need to talk." Arya's blood turned to ice. This was it, the moment everything fell apart. Viktor knew she was playing him, which meant he'd probably known from the beginning, had been feeding her false information, using her to get to Lucien. She had maybe an hour before Viktor's people came for her, maybe less. Moving fast, she grabbed the emergency bag she'd prepared, cash, fake ID, weapon, burner phone. She sent a single coded text to the number she had for Lucien. "Compromised. Extraction needed. Location Bravo." Location Bravo was a warehouse they'd designated as an emergency meeting point. It was neutral ground, defensible, far enough from Victor's operations to buy them time. She made it 3 blocks before the black SUVs appeared. Arya ran. Through alleys, across streets, using every evasion technique she'd learned. But Victor's people were good, and they were motivated. They herded her systematically, cutting off escape routes, forcing her toward the waterfront. She emerged onto a pier, breathing hard, trapped. The ocean stretched behind her, dark and cold. In front of her, 6 armed men emerged from the shadows. Victor stepped out last, unhurried, confident. I have to admit, you had me fooled for almost a week. After that, I knew. But I let you keep playing because I was curious what Varric would do. What gave me away? She kept her hand near her weapon, calculating odds. 6 against 1, not good. You're too competent, too strategic. Victor smiled. Someone who'd actually betrayed Varric out of self-interest wouldn't care about our operational efficiency, wouldn't notice the flaws in our organization. But you did, because you were looking for weaknesses to report back. So what now? You kill me and send my body to Lucienne as a message? Actually, I have something better planned. Victor pulled out his phone, showed her a video feed. It took her a moment to recognize what she was seeing. Lucienne, bound to a chair in what looked like a basement, blood on his face from a recent beating. We grabbed him an hour ago, walked right into a trap because you sent him the extraction code. Arya's heart stopped. You intercepted the message. Cloned your phone days ago. Every text, every call, I've seen it all. Victor's smile widened. He's at our facility on the south side. And here's the beautiful part. You're going to help me break him. Or I put a bullet in your head and do it anyway, but slower. I'll never. You will. Because breaking him breaks you, and that's what I want. To destroy both of you completely before I kill you. He nodded to his men. Take her. They moved in, and Arya made her decision. She couldn't fight 6 trained men, but she could make sure Victor didn't get what he wanted. She turned and jumped off the pier into the freezing water below. The cold hit like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. She went deep, swimming away from the pier, using the darkness and the current to hide her direction. Bullets hit the water around her, but in the dark, they were firing blind. She surfaced 50 yards away, gasping, already feeling hypothermia setting in. The shore was another 100 yards. She could make it, had to make it. Behind her, she heard Victor shouting orders, but she was already swimming, pulling herself through the water with strokes that grew weaker with each passing second. She made it to shore, collapsed on the rocky beach, her whole body shaking. No time to rest. Victor's people would be coming. She forced herself up, forced herself to move. A car pulled up, headlights blinding. Arya raised her weapon with trembling hands, prepared to fight to the last. Get in! Ivan's voice, rough and urgent. Now! She stumbled to the car, fell into the back seat. Ivan floored it before her door was even closed. How did you... Boss told me to watch for the extraction code, be ready to provide backup. Ivan took a corner fast enough to make the tires scream. Good thing I was. You look like death. Lucienne, she gasped through chattering teeth. Victor has him. Southside facility. I know. We're already mobilizing. He handed her a blanket from the front seat, but you need medical attention first. No hospitals, no delays. She wrapped the blanket around herself, tried to stop shaking. How many people do we have? Everyone. Giovanni sent his people. Dimitri's bringing the Russians. Even Sergei's crew is coming. When word got out that Victor grabbed the boss, Ivan's voice was grim. Every alliance we've built, they're all coming through. Because Lucien had spent months building relationships instead of just demanding obedience. Because he'd shown them that cooperation was stronger than domination. Because when it mattered, people chose to fight for him rather than against him. They arrived at a warehouse that had been converted into a command center. Maps covered every surface, communication equipment scattered across tables, armed men checking weapons and reviewing tactical plans. Giovanni Calabrese looked up when Arya entered, his expression shifting from surprise to respect. You're alive. Good. We need your tactical mind. She moved to the maps, water still dripping from her clothes, and studied the situation. Victor's South Side facility was essentially a fortress, concrete walls, limited entry points, designed to withstand exactly this kind of assault. Direct attack will cost too many lives, she said, her strategic mind overriding her fear for Lucian. We need to draw them out, make them vulnerable. How? Dmitri asked. She thought fast, pulling together everything she knew about Victor's operation, his psychology, his patterns. Victor wants to break Lucian publicly, wants to prove he's stronger, smarter. We use that arrogance against him. Explain. We offer a trade. Me for Lucian. Victor will jump at it. He gets to hurt me in front of Lucian, gets to destroy us both at once. She looked around the room. But we'll be ready. The moment the exchange starts, we hit them from every direction. You're offering yourself as bait, Giovanni said flatly. I'm offering myself as a weapon. She pulled out her phone, the one Victor had cloned. And I'm betting Victor can't resist the opportunity. The message she sent was simple. I'll trade myself for Varric. Midnight, the pier where you lost me. Come alone or I disappear and you get nothing. Victor's response came within minutes. Agreed. But if I see any of Varric's people, I kill him immediately. Accepted. Midnight. Just you and me. She looked up at the assembled crime lords, these dangerous men who had agreed to work together because Lucien had shown them a better way. We have 4 hours to set this up. Victor won't come alone, and neither will I. But he'll think he has the advantage. They planned meticulously. Snipers positioned on surrounding buildings. Teams ready to move in from multiple directions. Boats in the water in case anyone tried to escape that way. It was coordinated, professional, and exactly the kind of operation that required absolute trust among allies. At 11:30, Arya stood on the pier, the same spot where she jumped hours earlier. She was wearing a wire, though she knew Victor would check for it and find it. That was intentional. Let him think he'd found her only precaution. The real insurance was the tracker they'd surgically implanted under her skin, small enough to be invisible, advanced enough to transmit through almost anything, and the subcutaneous earpiece that would let her hear Yvonne's instructions, disguised as an ear infection that required medicated cotton. At midnight exactly, headlights appeared. Victor's SUV, followed by 2 more vehicles. So much for coming alone, but she'd expected that. Victor emerged, and behind him 2 men dragged Lucian out of the second vehicle. He was in bad shape, beaten, bloodied, barely conscious. Seeing him like that made Arya's rage spike, hot and consuming. Let him go, she called out. After you submit to a search, I'm not stupid enough to think you came unarmed. Victor smiled. Strip, completely. Then we'll talk. She'd anticipated this too. Slowly, she removed her jacket, the wire clearly visible taped to her chest, then her shirt, her pants, everything, until she stood in the cold in just her underwear. Victor's men searched her clothes, found the weapon she'd hidden, the knife in her boot. They found the wire, ripped it off with casual brutality. They didn't find the tracker or the earpiece, both too small and too well placed. Satisfied? She kept her voice steady despite the cold and the humiliation. Almost. Victor walked closer. I want you to understand something before we end this. Everything you did, infiltrating my operation, stealing Nikolai's files, thinking you were so clever, I allowed it. Every piece of information you got, I wanted you to have. You didn't outsmart me. You danced exactly where I told you to dance. Is that supposed to break me? No. This is... He nodded, and one of his men put a gun to Lucien head. You're going to watch him die, slowly, painfully, and then you'll beg me to kill you too. Victor. Lucian's voice was rough, damaged, but still defiant. You're making a mistake. Am I? I have you both. I have leverage over the federal investigation through my brother. I'm about to take over your entire operation. Victor laughed. What mistake? You trusted your brother, Lucian said. Victor's expression flickered. What? Nikolai. You think he's loyal to you, but he's been planning to betray you since this started. Why do you think he kept those files? They weren't just about me. They were about you too. Insurance. You're lying. Am I? Lucian coughed, blood on his lips. Check his recent communications. See who he's really been talking to. Arya saw the seed of doubt take root. Victor pulled out his phone, started scrolling. His face went pale. That was the signal. Gunfire erupted from every direction at once. Snipers took out Victor's visible guards. Teams rushed in from the shadows. The pier became chaos, exactly as planned. Arya dropped flat, crawling toward Lucien while bullets flew overhead. She reached him, started working on his restraints. "You came," he gasped. "Of course I came, you idiot." She got the ropes off, helped him to his feet. "Can you move?" "Have to." He leaned on her, and together they stumbled toward cover. Victor was screaming orders, trying to rally his people, but it was too late. He was surrounded, outgunned, and his own paranoia about Nikolai had distracted him at exactly the wrong moment. Ivan appeared beside them, weapon drawn. "We've got this. Get the boss out of here." Arya half-carried Lucien to a waiting car. Behind them, the sounds of the firefight continued, but they were already moving, Ivan's team providing cover as they escaped. At a safe house across the city, a doctor was waiting. She worked on Lucien's injuries while Arya paced, still in the clothes someone had provided to replace her ruined outfit, unable to sit still. "He'll be fine," the doctor said finally. "Broken ribs, concussion, various contusions, but nothing permanent. He's lucky." Lucky. Arya almost laughed. None of this was luck. This was survival through strategy, alliance, and absolute commitment to each other. When the doctor left, she sat beside Lucien's bed. He was sedated, breathing steadily, the worst of his injuries treated. She took his hand, felt tears finally coming. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. "When I saw that video, when I knew Victor had you." His fingers squeezed hers weakly. "Still here," he murmured, not fully awake. "Still fighting. Always fighting." She kissed his forehead. "Rest now. I've got watch." The next 2 days were a blur. Ivan reported that Viktor Kozlov had been taken alive, along with most of his key people. Nikolai had indeed been planning to betray Viktor, and faced with evidence of both brothers' treachery, the federal case collapsed entirely. The prosecutors couldn't use witnesses who were actively betraying each other. Lucien's organization survived. More than survived. The alliances they'd built held strong, and several of Victor's former territories agreed to peace rather than continued conflict. When Lucien was finally coherent and mobile, Arya helped him to his office. The mansion felt different somehow, like they'd crossed a threshold and couldn't go back. "We need to talk," he said, settling carefully into his chair. "About what?" "About this life, what it costs, what it's already cost you." He looked at her directly. "You jumped off a pier into freezing water. You offered yourself as bait to save me. This is destroying you slowly, Arya. And I can't keep watching that happen." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time to change. Not everything, but enough that we're not constantly fighting wars, not constantly one step from death." He took her hand. "The federal investigation failing, it's an opportunity. We can restructure, go more legitimate, reduce the violence. You want to go straight?" "I want to go straighter. There's a difference." He smiled slightly. "I'll never be completely clean, but I can be cleaner, can build something that doesn't require us to sacrifice everything just to survive." Arya thought about it. About the person she'd been, Emma Harper, the teacher who wanted to help children. About who she'd become, Arya Vale, strategist in a criminal empire. And about who she might still become. "What would that look like?" she asked. "Property development, legitimate shipping operations, maybe some private security consulting, things that use the same skills, the same networks, but within legal boundaries." He was already planning, she could see it. "It won't be easy. Some allies won't like it, some enemies will see it as weakness. But we have enough power now to make the transition." "And us?" "We stay together. We build something real, something that doesn't require constant deception and violence." His voice softened. "We find a way to be happy, Arya. Actually happy. Not just surviving." But she wanted to believe it was possible. "What about the people who won't let you go legitimate? The rivals, the enemies?" "We handle them. Carefully, strategically, with all the allies we've built." He pulled her closer. "But we do it with an exit strategy in mind. 5 years, maybe 10, and we're out completely. Living somewhere quiet, being normal people." "We'll never be normal people." "No. But we can try." He kissed her softly. "Will you try with me?" She thought about Sophie, about the life stolen from her, about Emma Harper's dreams of teaching and safety, about Arya Vale's reality of violence and strategy. And she thought about Lucian, about this impossible man who'd somehow made her feel seen and valued despite all the darkness. "Yes," she said. "Let's try." The transition took 3 years. 3 years of careful negotiation, of converting illegal operations to legitimate ones, of paying off debts and settling old scores. It wasn't clean and it wasn't bloodless, but it was possible. Arya took business classes, learned to run the legitimate side of their operations. She was good at it, her tactical mind translating perfectly to corporate strategy. Lucian Yen handled the political side, maintaining relationships while slowly extracting himself from criminal entanglements. Giovanni Calabrese retired, leaving his operation to his nephew with instructions to maintain peace with Lucien. Dmitry Kozlov moved his operations overseas. Sergei became a consultant for their security firm. The world kept turning, and they kept adapting. On a morning 5 years after that night on the pier, Arya woke in their new home. A house in the suburbs, far from the mansion, far from the violence. Lucien was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. "Morning," he said, kissing her as she entered. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years." She accepted the coffee, looked around the kitchen. It was ordinary, domestic, nothing like the luxury of his old office or the constant tension of their previous life. It was perfect. "Board meeting at 10, he said. "Then lunch with the mayor about the waterfront development project." "All legitimate business," she marveled. "No hidden agendas, no violence, just actual boring corporate work." "Are you complaining?" "Not even a little," she smiled. "Though I do miss the adrenaline sometimes. We can always take up skydiving." They laughed, and it felt easy, natural. They'd made it. Against all odds, through all the violence and betrayal and impossible situations, they'd made it to the other side. That afternoon, Arya got a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, old paranoia making her cautious. But curiosity won. "Hello? Is this Arya Vale?" A woman's voice, young, nervous. "Who's asking?" "My name is Rebecca Chen. I was Marcus Reeves' daughter. I just found out the truth about what he did to Sophie Harper, about who really killed him and why." Arya's blood ran cold. "How did you get this number?" "Daniel Reeves told me. Before he died, he made me promise to find you, to tell you." Rebecca's voice broke. "To tell you thank you for making sure my father faced justice when the system failed Sophie." "Daniel's dead?" 6 months ago, cancer. He spent his last year trying to make peace with what happened. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "He wanted me to know the truth, to understand that sometimes justice happens outside courtrooms, and he wanted you to know that he understood why you did what you did." Arya felt tears burning. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he said you were probably still carrying guilt, still thinking you were no better than the people who hurt your sister. But you're not. You gave Sophie justice when no one else would. That matters." After they hung up, Arya sat staring at her phone for a long time. Lucien found her there, took one look at her face, and pulled her close. "What happened?" She told him everything, about Rebecca, about Daniel, about the absolution she'd never expected to receive. "You deserve to hear that," Lucien said quietly. "You've been carrying that guilt for years. I still did terrible things. In pursuit of justice. That's different from doing them for pleasure or power." He tilted her face up. "You're not a monster, Arya. You never were. You were someone who did difficult things because they needed doing. And now? Now we're different people, building different lives," he smiled. "Parents, maybe, if you want. Teachers in our own way through the foundation we're building." They'd established a foundation for victims of domestic violence, a way to use their resources to help people like Sophie. It felt like redemption, or at least progress toward it. "I want that," Arya said. "The family, the foundation, all of it. A life that's about building instead of surviving. Then that's what we'll have." 2 years later, Arya stood in a hospital room, holding their daughter, a tiny, perfect thing named Sophie, after the sister she'd lost. Lucien was beside her, tears in his eyes, transformed completely from the crime lord he'd been into something softer, something better. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's ours." Arya looked up at him. "And she'll never know the world we came from. She'll be safe, loved, protected." We'll make sure of it. They would. They'd survived gang wars and federal investigations, betrayals and violence, everything the world threw at them. They'd survived by being smarter, stronger, more committed to each other than anyone expected. And now they'd build something beautiful from the ashes of all that destruction. A family. A life. A future that honored the past without being defined by it. Ivan visited them in the hospital, bringing flowers and an awkward but genuine smile. He'd stayed on as head of security for their legitimate businesses, redirecting his tactical mind toward corporate protection instead of gang warfare. "She looks like trouble," he said, studying baby Sophie. "She's going to be brilliant," Arya corrected, "and fierce, and everything good we never got to be." "Better version of us," Lucian agreed. "That's the plan." Giovanni sent a card and a substantial donation to their foundation. Dmitri sent a vintage bottle of wine with a note that read simply, "Congratulations on surviving long enough to see this day." Even Sergei contributed in his gruff way. The old alliances held transformed into legitimate partnerships and distant friendships. The violence faded into memory. The past became just that, past rather than present threat. On their daughter's first birthday, Arya and Lucian stood in their backyard watching her toddle around, exploring her world with fearless curiosity. Friends and family surrounded them, real friends now, not just allies of convenience. "Do you ever miss it?" Arya asked quietly. "The power, the danger, the empire?" Lucian was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie laugh as she chased a butterfly. "Sometimes I miss the clarity, knowing exactly who your enemies were, having simple problems with violent solutions. And then I remember what it cost. The constant fear, the isolation, the way it hollowed us out." He pulled her close. "This is better. This is real. Even though it's boring? Especially because it's boring. Boring means safe. Boring means our daughter grows up without trauma, without violence, without having to build walls around herself just to survive." Arya leaned into him, watched Sophie toddle toward them with that absolute trust children have in their parents. "We made it. Against all odds, we actually made it. We did. And we'll keep making it. Every day." He kissed the top of her head. "Together. Together." It was the word that had saved them, over and over. Together they'd survived when alone they would have fallen. Together they'd built something real from the ruins of their broken pasts. As the sun set over their peaceful suburban home, Arya felt the last remnants of fear finally release their grip. Emma Harper, who'd lost everything, had found something worth living for. Arya Vale, who'd built herself from survival instinct and strategic thinking, had learned to build from love instead. And the woman she was now, mother, partner, philanthropist, was the synthesis of both, the person she'd always had the potential to become. Sophie reached them, demanding to be picked up, and Lucian scooped her up with practiced ease. She giggled, completely secure in his arms, knowing nothing of the violence he'd once commanded. "Story time," Sophie announced, her vocabulary growing daily. "What story do you want?" Arya asked. "Princess!" Sophie shouted with toddler enthusiasm. Arya thought about princesses, about damsels in distress waiting to be rescued, about the stories she'd been told as a child and the reality she'd lived. "How about a different story?" she said. "About a brave woman who saved herself, and a powerful man who learned that strength means knowing when to fight and when to build." "And they lived happily ever after?" Sophie asked, already knowing how stories were supposed to end. Arya looked at Lucian, saw her own contentment reflected in his eyes. They'd earned this ending, paid for it in blood and fear and impossible choices. But they'd earned it. "Yes," she said, settling into the story. "They lived happily ever after. Not because everything was perfect, but because they chose each other, every single day, no matter what." Sophie's eyes were already drooping, lulled by the familiar rhythm of storytelling. But Arya continued anyway, telling the tale of two broken people who found each other in darkness and chose to walk toward the light together. It wasn't the story she'd imagined for herself all those years ago when she was Emma Harper, dreaming of teaching and safety. It wasn't the ending she'd expected when she was Arya Vale, surviving moment to moment in Lucien Varick's dangerous world. But it was real, it was earned, and it was theirs. As night fell and they carried their sleeping daughter to bed, Arya felt peace settle over her like a blanket. The past would always be there, the scars, the memories, the ghosts, But they didn't control her anymore. She'd survived. They'd survived. And in surviving, they'd found something better than safety or power or revenge. They'd found each other, found home, found a future worth fighting for. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered.